Have you ever wondered why two people can live in the same world, see the same events, and yet walk away with completely different truths? Why reality never feels as simple as it looks, and why understanding ourselves often feels harder than understanding the universe? Tonight, on Dreamline Philosophy, we explore the thinker who dedicated his life to these questions, Immanuel Kant. Kant lived a quiet and disciplined life. He stayed in the same town, followed the same routine, and rarely traveled. To many people, he looked like an ordinary man, someone the world would quickly forget. But behind that simple life was a mind working tirelessly to answer the deepest questions of human existence. Kant lived in a time when old beliefs were fading and new ideas were rising. Science was challenging centuries of tradition, religion was being questioned, and people were searching for something solid to hold on to. Kant stepped into this uncertain world with one goal: to understand what the human mind can truly know and what lies beyond its limits. He believed that understanding the world begins with understanding ourselves. Before we search for truth outside, we must understand how our minds shape everything we see. Kant taught that the mind is not a passive observer. It actively organizes and interprets reality. That is why no two people see the world in exactly the same way. Our minds play a part in everything we experience. But Kant's greatest contribution was not about knowledge. It was about human dignity. He believed that every person carries within them a quiet moral law, an inner guide that tells us to act not from fear, desire, or habit, but from what we know is right. For Kant, freedom does not mean doing whatever we want. True freedom means choosing our actions based on principles we can stand behind, actions we would want everyone to follow. Life, he knew, is uncertain. We cannot control the world or predict what will happen, but we can control how we think, how we act, and who we choose to become. That is where our true strength lies. So as you relax into the stillness of this night, let me ask you one more question. What kind of person do you hope to become when no one is watching? Tonight, we begin the journey into Kant's quiet, powerful world, a journey into clarity, reason, and the calm strength of understanding yourself. Part 1. Who was Kant? Chapter 1. Early life in Königsberg. Immanuel Kant was born in 1724 in a small Prussian city called Königsberg, a place of cobblestone streets, quiet neighborhoods, and a river that split the town into winding bridges and small islands. It wasn't a grand city of empires, nor a center of bustling trade. It was modest, calm, almost tucked away from the world, and in many ways, it reflected the early life of the quiet boy growing up within it. Kant was the fourth of 9 children, though only 4 survived into adulthood. His family lived with little money, supported mostly by his father's work as a leather craftsman. Their home was filled with discipline, simplicity, and deep religious influence. His mother, a gentle and thoughtful woman, had a quiet wisdom that shaped him more than anyone else. She didn't know philosophy, but she taught him to think. She encouraged him to look at the world with wonder, to ask questions instead of accepting simple answers. She planted a seed that would eventually grow into one of the most influential minds in history. Young Kant was not physically strong. He was small, thin, often sick, and easily fatigued. But he carried inside him a bright, restless mind. He loved to read, to observe people, and to explore ideas far bigger than the small world he lived in. Even as a boy, he was fascinated by the structure of things, the way the sky seemed orderly, the way thoughts felt organized, the way moral choices felt heavier than simple emotions. This sensitivity would stay with him for his entire life. Königsberg was his entire world, and yet this small provincial town, far from the great intellectual centers of Europe, became the birthplace of one of the most radical transformations in modern thought. Kant would eventually describe his hometown as a window to the world, not because of its size, but because the mind looking out from that window was awake, searching, and unafraid to question the deepest assumptions of human life. Chapter 2. A quiet life of radical ideas. Kant's adult life was not the journey of an adventurer. He didn't travel across continents or stand on grand stages giving speeches. His life was simple, almost repetitive. He taught at the local university, wrote in his modest room, took daily walks at the same exact time, and followed a routine so strict that neighbors joked their clocks could be set by watching him. But beneath this quiet surface, something extraordinary was happening. Within the walls of his small room, Kant wrestled with questions that had challenged humanity for centuries. What can we truly know? What is the difference between appearance and reality? What makes an action good? What does it mean to be free? And how should a human being live? He lived with a discipline that gave his mind room to move freely. His consistency was not a prison. It was a foundation. From this stable structure, he was able to build thoughts powerful enough to shake the entire intellectual world. Kant believed that philosophy didn't require a grand life. It required a patient mind, one willing to examine its own limits with honesty. And he did exactly that. He examined the structure of thought the way an astronomer studies the sky or a scientist dissects nature. To many, Kant looked like an ordinary professor. But inside that quiet man was a storm of ideas. He was dismantling centuries of philosophical tradition and rebuilding it from the ground up. His daily life may have been simple, but his ideas were anything but. Chapter 3. Kant's Turning Point. Before Kant became Kant, the Kant we read today, he was deeply influenced by a philosopher named David Hume. Hume's skepticism shook him. Hume argued that humans cannot truly know cause and effect, cannot trust their senses fully, and cannot claim certainty about the world. For many, Hume's ideas led to doubt and confusion. But for Kant, something else happened. He later wrote that Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumber. This was Kant's turning point. Until this moment, Kant had been exploring ideas slowly, thoughtfully, but without a clear mission. Hume changed that. Hume's challenge forced Kant to confront the limits of knowledge. And in doing so, Kant realized something that no philosopher before him had fully seen. The mind is not a passive observer of the world. It shapes the world as we know it. This insight was revolutionary. Kant recognized that our minds supply part of the structure we use to understand reality. Space-time, causality, they're not simply out there. They are forms through which the mind organizes experience. Without these mental structures, the world would be an overwhelming chaos of sensations. This discovery changed everything. Kant realized that Hume was right about the limits of knowledge, but wrong about what those limits meant. The limits were not weaknesses. They were conditions. They were the reason experience is possible at all. This became the spark that ignited Kant's greatest work. It was as though he had found a hidden doorway in the architecture of the mind. He stepped through it, and what he discovered on the other side reshaped the intellectual destiny of the Western world. Chapter 4. Why he changed philosophy forever. Before Kant, philosophy was pulled in two directions. One camp believed that knowledge comes from experience. Our senses, our observations, our memories. The other camp believed that knowledge comes from reason, logic, concepts, ideas that exist before experience. These two camps had argued for centuries without resolution. Kant's genius was to see that both were right and both were incomplete. He proposed a new answer. Experience gives us content. Reason gives us structure. Truth requires both. This idea became the core of his masterpiece, The Critique of Pure Reason, a book so complex, so dense, and so ambitious that even Kant admitted it was difficult. But within its pages was a revolution. Kant showed that the mind plays an active role in shaping experience, that we are co-creators of the world as we know it. With this one insight, he shifted philosophy from a battle over origins to a study of conditions, conditions of knowledge, conditions of morality, conditions of freedom. He didn't just contribute to philosophy, he changed its central question. Chapter 5. The Mind Behind the Critique. Kant's work was not an explosion of passion, nor a burst of inspiration. It was the result of decades of patient, precise, disciplined thinking. His mind was like a silent engine, always turning, always refining, always questioning. He believed that philosophy should help us live better, not by giving us easy answers, but by showing us how to think clearly. His philosophy is not emotional. It is structured like an intricate machine. Every idea fits into a larger whole. Every argument supports something bigger. Every detail matters. The Kant who wrote the Critiques was not the quiet professor anymore. He was a thinker who had discovered a new continent in the human mind. He understood the limits of knowledge, but he also understood the power of reason. He understood the fragility of human life, but he also believed in the dignity of every person. He understood the emptiness of a world without certainty, but he also offered a path toward freedom. Kant's mind was not dramatic. It was not chaotic. It was not fiery like Nietzsche or poetic like Dostoevsky. Kant's mind was an instrument of clarity, a lantern that does not blind with brightness, but illuminates the path just enough for us to walk with confidence into the unknown. Part 2. The Age of Reason. Chapter 1. Enlightenment Roots. To understand Kant, we must step into the world he lived in, a world trembling between old beliefs and new discoveries. The 18th century is often called the Enlightenment, a moment in history when Europe began to shift its gaze from tradition toward reason, from authority toward curiosity, from fear toward knowledge. This was the age when scientific discoveries overturned ancient assumptions. The earth was no longer the center of creation. The heavens were no longer mysterious divine machinery. Nature was becoming readable, measurable, predictable. Galileo had challenged the skies. Newton had revealed the mathematics behind motion. Locke had proposed that the mind begins as a blank slate. Hume had questioned the stability of cause and effect. These ideas didn't just change science, they changed the way people understood themselves. If nature could be explained without miracles, if society could be shaped through laws instead of kings, if knowledge could be questioned instead of obeyed, then the human being was not a passive creature in a fixed world. Humanity was awakening. And yet, beneath all this progress, there was confusion. If reason could challenge religion, what would guide morality? If science could explain nature, could it also explain the human soul? If old truths crumbled, what new truths could hold a society together? Kant was born into this moment of historical tension. This world of shifting beliefs became the soil in which his ideas would grow. Chapter 2. Dare to Know. One phrase captured the entire spirit of the Enlightenment. Sapir Ode. Dare to know. This wasn't just a slogan. It was a challenge, a test of courage, a call to maturity. In Kant's time, many people lived under the weight of beliefs they never questioned, traditions passed down like heirlooms, accepted not because they were true, but because they were comfortable. Religion, monarchy, social hierarchy, these were not simply institutions. They were unquestioned assumptions. Kant believed that humanity had been living in a kind of self-imposed childhood. People preferred to be told what to think. They preferred certainty over freedom. They preferred obedience over responsibility. Dare to know meant stepping out of that childhood. It meant thinking for yourself. It meant facing the uncertainty of truth. It meant choosing reason over comfort. Kant believed that this was humanity's true task, to grow up. Not physically, but intellectually and morally. Most people do not want freedom, Kant said, because freedom requires effort. It requires the courage to examine your beliefs, the discipline to form your own principles, and the strength to act on them. Dare to know became the foundation of his entire philosophy. Because without the courage to think, there can be no philosophy, no morality, no freedom. Chapter 3. Reason versus Tradition. The Enlightenment pushed reason forward, but tradition still held enormous power. Many people feared that reason would lead to chaos, that questioning the old ways would tear society apart. Others feared that the disappearance of religious authority would leave humanity without moral guidance. Kant understood these fears. He saw the tension not as a battle, but as a crossroads. On one side, the comfort of tradition, safe, predictable, inherited. On the other, the risk of reason, uncertain, demanding, transformative. Kant believed that tradition was not the enemy, but it could not be the foundation of truth. If something was true, it must withstand examination. If something was moral, It must be so for reasons every person could accept. If something was just, it must apply equally to all. He did not want to destroy tradition. He wanted to rebuild it on deeper foundations. Reason, for Kant, was not cold logic or emotionless calculation. Reason was the light that allowed human beings to understand themselves and their responsibilities. Tradition tells us who we are. Reason allows us to choose who we become. This was the heart of the Enlightenment, not the rejection of the past, but the questioning of it. Kant believed that a mature humanity must examine tradition, not blindly follow it, not automatically destroy it, but test it through the lens of reason. Only what survives that test deserves to guide our lives. Chapter 4. Philosophy before Kant. Before Kant arrived, philosophy was divided into two camps, two great traditions locked in a centuries-long argument. Empiricists, like Locke and Hume, they believed that knowledge comes from experience. We learn through the senses, through observation, through the world around us. The mind, they said, begins empty, shaped only by what we encounter. Rationalists, like Descartes and Leibniz, they believed that knowledge comes from a mind. Ideas like logic, mathematics, and morality must come from reason, not experience. The mind, they said, contains truths deeper than anything the senses can offer. These two sides battled over the same questions. Where does knowledge come from? What is truth made of? Is a mind active or passive? Can we trust our senses? Can we trust our reasoning? The conflict was unresolved. Each side explained part of the world, but neither explained all of it. Then came Hume. Hume didn't just challenge rationalism, he shattered it. He showed that we could never truly prove causation, never truly prove the self, never truly prove morality. Many philosophers fell into skepticism after reading Hume. But Kant did something different. Instead of despairing, he asked a new question. What if both sides are partly right and partly wrong? What if knowledge requires both experience and reason? What if the mind and the world work together? This simple question became the spark that ignited his revolution. Chapter 5. What Kant wanted to fix. Kant believed that philosophy had reached a dead end. If empiricism was right, then we could never know anything with certainty. If rationalism was right, then experience mattered less than thought. Kant wanted to fix the foundations of philosophy, to find a bridge between the world we perceive and the mind that perceives it. He realized something no one had seen with such clarity. The mind shapes experience. The world provides content. Truth requires both. This became the core of his revolution. Kant didn't want to destroy past philosophy. He wanted to rebuild it on a foundation that could not collapse. He wanted to explain how knowledge is possible, how morality is possible, how freedom is possible, how reason and experience work together, how the human being can understand the world without claiming to know what lies beyond it. Kant wanted clarity not just for scholars, but for humanity itself. His project was not only intellectual, it was moral. He believed that understanding the limits of the mind would give us freedom, dignity, and responsibility. He believed that knowing what we cannot know is just as important as knowing what we can. Part 3. The Limits of Knowledge. Chapter 1. The question, what can we know? Before Kant reshaped philosophy, people believed that the human mind could either know everything about the world or almost nothing. The rationalists trusted reason so deeply that they believed logical thinking alone could reveal the structure of the universe. The empiricists trusted the senses so much that they believed everything we know must come from experience. But Kant asked a different question, one that changed everything. What can the human mind actually know? Not what we assume, not what we hope, not what we imagine, but what is possible for a mind like ours, shaped by certain limits, conditions, and structures. Kant believed that asking this question was not a sign of weakness, but of maturity. Because before we search for truth, we must understand the tools we are using to search. Our mind is powerful, but it is not infinite. Our senses give us information, but they do not give us the world as it truly is. Reason helps us organize experience, but cannot jump beyond experience. This wasn't a pessimistic conclusion. Kant wasn't trying to close doors. He was trying to show which doors exist, which doors are illusions, and which doors lead to real understanding. He believed that there is a boundary around human knowledge, not a wall, not a cage, but a horizon, the farthest point we can see, beyond which lies mystery. To know the limits of knowledge is to know where truth begins and where imagination takes over. Chapter 2. Mind as a Filter. One of Kant's most radical ideas is simple, yet astonishing. The mind is not a window. It is a filter. We don't receive the world as it is. We receive the world as our mind allows it to appear. Think of a lens. The lens shapes the light coming through it. It doesn't change the object, but it changes how the object looks. Kant believed the mind works exactly like that. Before we even become aware of something, before we describe it, before we think about it, before we name it, the mind has already filtered it through structures built into us. These structures include space, time, cause and effect, identity, quantity, possibility. Kant called these structures a priori forms, the conditions of experience that exist before experience. We don't learn space. We don't learn time. We don't learn causation. We are born with these mental forms. Every sight, every sound, every thought is sorted, arranged, and shaped through these forms. This explains why the world always appears in space. Events always happen in time. Causes always seem to produce effects, because the mind requires them to appear this way. The mind is not passively receiving reality. It is actively organizing it. This is why Kant said, "We do not understand the world as it is. We understand the world as our mind allows it to be understood." Chapter 3. Appearance versus Reality. Once Kant realized that the mind filters experience, he made a crucial distinction. Appearance versus reality. Appearance. What we experience through the senses, what the mind shapes, what becomes the world we live in. Reality. The way the world exists independently of us, untouched by our senses, beyond our mental filters. Kant called appearances phenomena, and he called reality noumena. Phenomena are what we can know. Noumena are what we cannot access directly. This distinction is one of Kant's greatest contributions. It explains why people argue about truth. It explains why we see the world differently. It explains why two people can experience the same event and create different interpretations. We only ever experience appearance, never the pure world behind that appearance. This is not a tragedy. It is simply the condition of being human. We live inside the world we can perceive, and we must accept that we are not gods. We do not have access to the divine viewpoint, only the human one. Chapter 4. Phenomena and Noumena. Kant used two key terms to describe the structure of reality. Phenomena, the world as we experience it, shaped by our senses, organized by the mind. Everything we see, hear, touch, taste, think, measure, or analyze belongs to the world of phenomena. This is the world of science, knowledge, experience, understanding. Phenomena are the only world we can live in. Noumena, the world as it exists independently of us, beyond space, beyond time, beyond causation, beyond human experience. Noumena are not mystical objects. They are the raw reality that our minds can never access directly. The noumenal world contains the true nature of things, the ultimate structure of reality. Whatever exists beyond human perception. We cannot know noumena. We can only know that they exist. This is Kant's miracle of humility. He teaches that knowledge requires boundaries, not to limit us, but to make understanding possible. If the mind tried to grasp the noumenal world directly, we would drown in confusion. By accepting our limits, we gain clarity. Chapter 5. Why truth is never fully accessible. For Kant, truth is not a possession. It is a direction. Human beings can move toward truth, approximate it, approach it, study it, and understand its structure, but we can never hold it completely in our hands. Why? Because every truth we experience passes through the filters of the mind. No matter how accurate our science becomes, no matter how brilliant our theories are, no matter how deeply we analyze reality, we are always doing so from inside the structure of human consciousness. We cannot remove the lens. The lens is part of being human. This does not make truth impossible. It makes truth human. Kant believed that the journey toward understanding is more important than the possession of final answers. The limits of knowledge are not prisons. They're guideposts. They show us where certainty ends and where thinking begins. They show us where science can speak and where humility must take over. They show us why philosophy matters, because only philosophy can help us navigate the boundary between what we know, what we can know, and what lies forever outside our reach. Kant believed that to live wisely is to embrace both knowledge and mystery, clarity and humility. We know enough to live well, to act morally, to understand ourselves, to seek meaning. But we do not know everything, and that is not a failure. That is the condition of being human. Part 4. Categories of the Mind. Chapter 1. The Mind Shapes Experience. Up to this point, we've been circling around one of Kant's most important insights, the idea that the mind is not a passive recorder of reality. It does not simply receive impressions from the world. It doesn't sit quietly, taking notes like a reporter. The mind is an architect. It organizes, shapes, structures, and interprets the flow of sensations that strike it. Kant believed that every moment of experience is built through a cooperation between the raw data of the senses and the organizing power of the mind. Without the senses, we'd have no materials to work with. Without the mind, those materials would remain an unstructured chaos, a blur of sounds, colors, pressures, tastes, and feelings with no meaning. Experience is only possible because the mind takes that raw material and arranges it into a coherent world. This is why Kant said, "Thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind." We need both. The world gives us the material. The mind gives us the form. And only when these two meet do we have something we can call experience. Chapter 2. Space and Time as Mental Forms. One of the boldest claims in Kant's entire philosophy is this: space and time are not features of the external world. They are features of the human mind. We don't discover space. We don't discover time. We bring space and time with us. They're like lenses through which all perception must pass. Without them, nothing would appear anywhere, nothing would appear in any order, and nothing could be recognized as an event. Kant calls space and time forms of intuition, the basic mental frameworks that structure all experience. This means everything we see appears in space. Everything we experience occurs in time, not because the world demands it, but because the mind requires it. This idea was revolutionary. It meant that the mind contributes something fundamental to the nature of the world we perceive. The mind is not discovering a pre-made universe. It is participating in its construction. It's not that space and time do not exist, but rather that space and time exist as conditions for human consciousness. If all human beings disappeared, space and time, at least in the forms we experience, would disappear with us. For Kant, this is not fantasy. It is the necessary truth behind human experience. And it sets the stage for something even more radical: the categories of the mind. Chapter 3. The 12 Categories. Once Kant realized that the mind structures experience through space and time, he went further and asked a deeper question: what other mental structures are required for experience to be possible? He identified 12 basic concepts, 12 categories that the mind uses to organize thoughts and perceptions. These categories include unity, seeing things as one; plurality, seeing many things; totality, seeing a complete whole; reality, recognizing something exists; negation, recognizing something does not; limitation, recognizing boundaries; substance, seeing something as the thing behind changes; causation, connecting events as cause and effect; community, seeing interactions between objects; possibility, actuality; necessity. These categories are not learned from experience. They're the conditions that make experience possible. Without the category of unity, we could not see one object. Without causation, we could not understand events. Without substance, we could not recognize that something continues to exist over time. Experience is not just sensations. It is sensations organized by these categories. The categories act like the framework of a house. You don't see them, but without them, the house collapses. We never perceive the categories directly. We only perceive the world through them. This is why Kant said the mind supplies the rules for how experience must be interpreted. The categories are those rules. Chapter 4, Cause and Effect. Among all the categories, none shook the philosophical world more than causation. David Hume had challenged the idea of cause and effect. He argued that we never truly see one event causing another. We only see one event followed by another. The connection between them is something we imagine, not something we observe. Kant agreed with Hume that cause and effect are not given by the senses. But he disagreed with Hume's conclusion. Kant believed that cause and effect are not learned from observing the world. They are built into the way the mind organizes experience. We don't see causation. We impose causation. We do not wait to observe it. We require it in order to make sense of events. Imagine a world without cause and effect. Events would not follow logically. Nothing would predict anything else. We could not understand motion, change, or action. Science would be impossible. Memory and anticipation would lose meaning. Without causation, experience collapses. So Kant concluded that causation is a category of the mind, a rule the mind uses to turn raw sensations into meaningful events. Causation is not discovered, it is applied. This move rescued both science, which depends on cause and effect, philosophy, which needed a stronger foundation than observation alone. Kant showed that causation is a condition for experience. It is part of the operating system of the mind. Chapter 5, How the Mind Creates Reality. All of these insights lead to one of Kant's most profound conclusions. The mind does not merely see the world. It helps construct the world we see. We observe a world of objects, events, causes, substances, motion, space, time, interactions. But this world is not simply out there. It is a collaboration between the raw material of the senses and the organizing power of the mind. Kant does not say the world is imaginary. He does not say we create the world out of nothing. Instead, he says, we create the structure of experience. The world gives us sensations, shapes, colors, sounds, textures, pressures. The mind turns these sensations into a world. Objects, places, time, causes connections. Every experience you have is a blend of two forces. The world as it affects you, and the mind as it processes that effect. This is why the statement, the mind creates reality, is not metaphorical in Kant's system. It is literal, but not in a mystical way. The mind creates the appearance of reality, not the reality behind appearance. We never see the raw world. We only see the world shaped by our mental structures. This is why Kant said, understanding makes nature. Nature, the world as we experience it, is a product of both sensation and understanding. Without understanding, nature dissolves into chaos. Without sensation, understanding has nothing to work on. Kant's philosophy shows us something humbling and beautiful. We live in a world we participate in shaping. We are not passive viewers. We are active creators of meaning, order, and coherence. This does not make truth impossible. It makes truth human. It makes knowledge a partnership between the universe and the mind that encounters it. And it makes each moment of experience not just a perception, but a creation. Part 5, Kant's Revolution. Chapter 1, The Copernican Shift. In the history of philosophy, only a few thinkers created a shift so dramatic that the entire field had to reorganize around their ideas. Kant was one of them. He called his breakthrough a Copernican revolution. To understand why, think about what Copernicus did. Before him, everyone believed the Earth was at the center of the universe. All the stars, all the planets, everything in the sky seemed to revolve around us. Copernicus made one bold claim. What if it's the other way around? What if the Earth moves and the heavens remained still. This one shift flipped the entire understanding of the cosmos. Kant believed philosophy needed a similar reversal. For centuries, philosophers asked, how does the mind conform to the world? Kant asked a different question. What if the world must conform to the mind? This was his Copernican moment, a complete reversal, a reorientation of philosophy. Instead of assuming the mind must match the world, Kant proposed that the world we experience must match the structure of our minds. Just as Copernicus moved the Earth from the center of the universe, Kant moved the human mind to the center of experience. This was not arrogance. It was clarity. He wasn't claiming we create reality. He was claiming we create the experience of reality. It was a revolution no philosopher saw coming. Chapter 2. The subject creates the world. From Kant's Copernican shift blossomed a second radical idea. The subject, the human mind, plays an active role in constructing the world as we know it. Before Kant, the mind was often seen as a blank slate, a mirror, or a recording device. It simply reflected the world. It received impressions, processed them, and formed knowledge. But Kant rejected this passive model. He believed that the mind actively organizes experience. It provides the rules, the structures, the categories, the forms through which we process the flow of sensations. Without these structures, there is no world of objects, no stable identity, no cause and effect, no order, no nature, no experience. We would be surrounded by sensations, but unable to form them into anything coherent. So, according to Kant, the mind supplies the framework. Experience supplies the content. Together, they form the world we live in. He did not mean the mind literally creates mountains, rivers, and stars, but it creates the way we experience mountains, rivers, and stars. The mind does not create reality. It creates appearance. An appearance is the only world available to us. This idea was so revolutionary that many philosophers initially resisted it. Because if the mind participates in creating experience, then knowledge is not about discovering the world as it is, but discovering the conditions under which the world becomes knowable. For Kant, this made philosophy more scientific, not less. It meant we must first study the mind to understand how experience works. Chapter 3. Why Kant shocked Europe. When Kant published the Critique of Pure Reason, Europe was stunned. This wasn't just another philosophical treatise. This was a complete restructuring of human knowledge. Several ideas shocked readers. Space and time are not part of the world. They are part of us. People had always believed space and time were objective features of the universe. Kant claimed otherwise. He argued they're built into the mind as forms of perception. Cause and effect come from the mind, not experience. Science relies on causation. But Kant said causation is not learned. It is applied by the mind. We cannot know things in themselves. This contradicted centuries of metaphysics. Kant argued that we know only phenomena, the world shaped by our mental conditions. Metaphysical certainty is impossible. Questions about God, the soul, and the ultimate nature of reality cannot be answered through theoretical reason. These conclusions didn't destroy philosophy. They saved it from confusion. Kant showed why rationalists failed, why empiricists failed, and why both captured only part of the truth. Europe was shocked because Kant wasn't simply arguing with earlier philosophers. He was transforming the entire method of philosophy. He was telling thinkers, you are asking the wrong questions. And then he provided new ones. Chapter 4. Knowledge comes from us. Kant believed that knowledge is a synthesis. It is not pulled entirely from the world, nor produced entirely by the mind. It arises from the interaction of both. This is why Kant repeated, thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind. Content comes from the senses. Structure comes from the mind. Without content, the mind has nothing to think about. Without structure, sensations have no meaning. This is why Kant said, the understanding creates the law of nature. Not the law of nature in itself, but the law of nature as we experience it. Gravity exists independently of us, but our understanding of motion mass, force, that understanding is shaped through the categories of the mind. The world we experience is a collaboration between the universe and the human mind. For Kant, this made knowledge more secure, not less. Because the structures of the mind are universal and shared by all humans, our experiences can match, our science can advance, and our reasoning can converge. The stability of knowledge comes not from the world alone, but from the way human beings think. Chapter 5. The Birth of Modern Thought. Kant's revolution did more than solve philosophical disputes. It gave birth to new fields of thought. Phenomenology. Philosophers like Husserl and Heidegger explored the structure of experience in the spirit of Kant's insights. Existentialism. Thinkers like Kierkegaard and Sartre applied Kant's emphasis on autonomy to the human struggle for meaning. Cognitive science. Modern psychology echoes Kant's claim that the mind organizes experience through built-in structures. Moral philosophy. Kant's emphasis on dignity, duty, and autonomy shaped human rights, justice, and modern ethics. Modern epistemology. The study of knowledge still depends on Kant's framework today. Kant showed that we cannot know ultimate reality, but we can know the structure of experience. We cannot escape our minds, but we can understand our minds deeply. We cannot see truth from the universe's perspective, but we can seek truth from the human perspective, the only one we possess. This was the birth of modern thought, the recognition that understanding begins not with the world, but with ourselves. Kant didn't free us from limits. He taught us to understand them, and in that understanding, he gave us a new kind of freedom. A freedom not based on illusion, but on clarity. A freedom not based on control, but on self-awareness. A freedom not based on knowing everything, but on knowing what is truly possible. This was Kant's revolution. A revolution not of violence, but of reason. A revolution not of destruction, but of illumination. Part 6. Limits of Reason. Chapter 1. Can reason know God? Kant lived in a world where philosophers and theologians had spent centuries trying to prove the existence of God. They used grand arguments. God must exist because everything has a first cause. God must exist because morality requires a judge. God must exist because perfection cannot arise from imperfection. But Kant looked closely at these arguments and found something surprising. Reason cannot prove God. Reason cannot disprove God. Reason cannot reach God at all. Not because God is unreal, but because God, if God exists, belongs to the noumenal realm, a realm beyond human experience, beyond the senses, beyond the categories of the mind. Reason is powerful, but it works only within the boundaries of space, time, and causation. God, by definition, is outside those boundaries. So Kant argued that using reason to prove God is like trying to measure the weight of a dream. The tool simply cannot reach the object. This doesn't mean God does not matter. For Kant, God becomes a moral necessity, not a logical deduction. We cannot know God, but we can act as if morality is part of a larger, meaningful order. This is Kant's humility. Reason is bright, but it is not infinite. There are questions that even the sharpest mind cannot penetrate. Chapter 2. Can reason prove the soul? The soul is one of the oldest questions in human history. People want to know, what am I? Is there something in me that survives death? Is my identity deeper than the body? Many philosophers before Kant argued that the soul is a simple, eternal substance, unchanging, immortal, indestructible. But Kant analyzed these arguments with the same calm precision he used for God. His conclusion was similar. Reason cannot know the soul. Why? Because the soul is not something we experience through the senses. We never perceive a soul. We perceive thoughts, feelings, memories, choices. But the self behind them is never directly given. Kant believed that what we call the soul is the inner point of unity that organizes our experiences, a necessary idea, but not an object we can observe. It is a regulative idea, not a knowable thing. This insight is subtle but profound. You experience your thoughts. You experience your emotions, but you never experience you. Reason cannot prove the soul exists as a substance, but reason also cannot deny it. Kant leaves the door open, softly, cautiously, for faith, hope, and moral belief. Chapter 3. Does free will exist? Free will has tormented philosophers for centuries. If the world works through cause and effect, if every event is shaped by previous events, then where is freedom? Are we just part of a giant chain of causes, like falling dominoes? Kant's answer is both subtle and revolutionary. He says, in the phenomenal world, the world of appearances, everything is determined. But in the noumenal world, the world of the self, freedom is possible. This means, as physical beings, we exist in time and causation. As moral beings, we exist beyond them. When you act out of instinct, habit, or desire, you are acting as part nature. But when you act out of principle, when you choose an action because you believe it to be right, you step beyond causation. You become free. For Kant, freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is acting from reasons that you give yourself. So does free will exist? Kant says, free will is not something we can prove. Free will is something we must presuppose, because moral action is impossible without it. To hold someone responsible, we must believe they were free. To follow a moral law, we must believe we could have obeyed or disobeyed. Freedom is not a fact. Freedom is the condition of morality. You cannot see it, but you must live as if it is real. Chapter 4. The Antinomies. One of Kant's most brilliant and unsettling contributions is his discovery of the antinomies of reason. An antinomy is a pair of arguments where both sides appear logically true, yet they contradict each other. For example, antinomy 1. Is the universe finite or infinite? If it's finite, what exists beyond it? If it's infinite, how can infinity exist in reality? Both arguments become impossible. Antinomy 2. Are events determined, or is there freedom? If everything has a cause, freedom vanishes. If some events have no cause, the universe becomes chaotic. Both seem logical. Both lead to contradictions. Antinomy 3. Does the world have a first cause? If it has no first cause, the chain is infinite. If it has a first cause, that cause must exist outside time. Both seem logical. Both become impossible. Kant realized what these paradoxes prove. Reason breaks down when it tries to go beyond experience. The moment reason tries to talk about the beginning of the universe, the end of the universe, the totality of causes, the highest reality, the true nature of self, the existence of a first cause, it collapses into contradiction. Reason is brilliant, but it is not built to grasp totality. It is built to navigate experience. The antinomies show the borders of the mind, the point where thinking becomes tangled, like a string tied into its own knots. Kant's conclusion is not despair. It is clarity. When reason contradicts itself, it is not the world that is broken. It is reason stepping outside its proper domain. Chapter 5. Why reason contradicts itself. When reason enters areas beyond experience, when it tries to grasp the cosmos as a whole, or the ultimate nature of the self, or God, or infinity, it begins to create illusions. Kant calls this tendency transcendental illusion. It is not a foolish mistake. It is natural. It is built into the mind. Reason always seeks completeness. It wants the final answer. It wants the full picture. It wants perfection. But the world of experience is always limited, incomplete, partial. So reason tries to leap over that gap and imagine the whole. This leap is where contradictions appear. Reason contradicts itself because it tries to know things it cannot experience. It tries to see beyond the lens of the mind. It tries to escape the boundaries of human thought. Kant believed that wisdom comes not from rejecting reason, but from understanding its limits. These limits are not weaknesses. They are guideposts. They tell us what we can know, what we cannot know, what we must take on faith, what we must leave to morality, what belongs to the noumenal realm. Reason is powerful. Reason gives structure to our world. Reason gives dignity to our choices. Reason gives clarity to our understanding. But reason is not infinite. Just as the eye cannot see beyond light, the mind cannot think beyond the conditions of thought. Kant's philosophy invites us to humility, to recognize both our power and our limits. We know enough to act wisely. We know enough to live morally. We know enough to pursue truth. But we do not know everything. And that is precisely what makes our search meaningful. Part 7. The Noumenal Realm. Chapter 1. The Thing in Itself. One of Kant's most mysterious and influential ideas is the concept of the thing in itself. He believed that behind everything we experience, behind every sound, every color, every object, every event, there's something real, something independent, something untouched by the human mind. But this something is not what we directly perceive. It is not the object as it appears to us. It is what the object is in itself, outside of our perception. Kant called this the noumenon, and he called the world of appearances phenomena. Phenomena are shaped by the human mind. Noumena exist independently of it. The phenomenon is the tree as you see it, colored, shaped, placed in space, existing in time, affected by causation, structured by your perception. The noumenon is the tree as it exists beyond you, without color, without space, without time, without the categories you impose. The phenomenon is the world you can understand. The noumenon is the world you cannot reach. Kant didn't invent this distinction to confuse us. He created it to explain something crucial. Experience is always filtered. Reality is always deeper than experience. Behind every perception lies a reality untouched by human thought. And that reality, the noumenal, remains forever hidden. Chapter 2. What lies beyond experience? So what lies beyond experience? What is the noumenal world made of? What exists outside the limits of space, time, and causation? Kant gives a surprising answer. We cannot know, not even a little, not even in faint outlines. Why? Because every answer we try to give will inevitably rely on the same mental structures that shape the phenomenal world. To imagine the noumenal, we accidentally drag it back into the phenomenal. If we try to imagine it in space, we're already wrong. Space belongs to the mind, not to reality in itself. If we imagine it in time, we're wrong again. Time is another mental form. If we imagine it as caused by something, we're still wrong. Causation is a category of understanding, not a property of the noumenal world. Every attempt to picture the noumenal ends up being a picture of our own mind. This is why Kant insists. The noumenal realm is unknowable, not because it is supernatural, but because it exists outside the conditions that make knowledge possible. What lies beyond experience? We can say only this. Something is there. It affects us. It is the source of sensations. But it cannot be described, defined, or conceptualized. It is not mystical. It is not imaginary. It is simply outside the reach of human cognition. Chapter 3. Why we can't access it. Why can't the human mind access the noumenal realm? Kant gives 3 reasons. 1. The mind structures all experience. Every experience is shaped through space, time, causation, substance, plurality, unity. We cannot shut these off. They're the conditions for consciousness itself. If we remove them, there would be no experience left. 2. Knowledge requires categories. The categories of understanding are what allow us to recognize objects, events, and relations. Without categories, the world dissolves into chaotic sensations. Noumenal reality lies outside these categories. Therefore, the mind cannot organize it. And without organization, knowledge is impossible. 3. Reason misleads itself. When reason tries to think beyond experience, it gets trapped in contradictions, antinomy after antinomy, paradox after paradox. The mind is powerful, but it is not infinite. It is built for the phenomenal world, not the noumenal. This is why Kant said, the understanding does not derive its laws from nature, but prescribes them to nature. We cannot access the noumenal world because our mind is built to operate only within phenomena. Trying to grasp the noumenal is like trying to see without light or breathe without air. The conditions for knowing do not apply there. Chapter 4. Ethics and the Noumenal. At first, Kant's distinction between phenomena and noumena might seem discouraging. If we cannot know ultimate reality, how can we live meaningfully? But here is where Kant's philosophy becomes beautiful. He believed that even though we cannot know the noumenal world, we could be connected to it. Where? In morality. The phenomenal world, the world of appearances, is governed by causation. Everything that happens in this world is shaped by previous events. But moral action, action guided by principle, cannot be reduced to causation. When you act because you believe something is right, not because of impulse, habit, or desire, you step outside the phenomenal chain of events. You reveal a different part of yourself, the noumenal self. Kant believed that the true self, the morally responsible self, belongs to the noumenal realm. This means the self is partly beyond space and time. The self is not fully determined by nature. The self can choose freely. The self participates in a higher order of reality. We cannot know the noumenal world, but through moral freedom, we can act within it. The noumenal world becomes the foundation for autonomy, dignity, and moral responsibility. Ethics is not grounded in nature. It is grounded in the noumenal. Chapter 5. Hope Beyond Knowledge. For all his limits and boundaries, Kant is not a philosopher of despair. He is surprisingly hopeful. He believed that the noumenal realm, though unknowable, is the grounding for three essential human hopes. The hope for freedom. Freedom cannot be proven scientifically, but in the noumenal, freedom is possible, and morality depends on it. The hope for the soul. We cannot prove the soul exists, but the noumenal allows a dimension of selfhood that survives beyond the physical. The hope for God. We cannot know God through reason, but the noumenal keeps open the possibility of a moral order greater than ourselves. Kant believed what we cannot know we may still hope for, not blindly, but responsibly. Human beings need knowledge, but they also need faith, morality, and meaning. Kant's philosophy offers a balance. We use reason to understand our limits. We use morality to guide our lives within those limits. And we use hope to reach toward the noumenal realm where reason cannot go. This is Kant's quiet optimism. Even if we cannot see the whole truth, we can live in alignment with it. We stand at the boundary between the world we know and the world we cannot know. On one side, clarity, science, experience, knowledge. On the other, mystery, freedom, dignity, meaning. Kant invites us to accept both, to embrace the known and honor the unknown, to understand our limits and find hope beyond them. Part 8. Moral Philosophy begins. Chapter 1. Why Kant turned to ethics. Up to this point in Kant's life, he had spent years exploring the boundaries of knowledge. He mapped the limits of reason, showed how the mind shapes experience, and revealed why certain truths remain forever hidden. But Kant was never content with understanding the mind alone. He wanted to understand the human being, not just as a knower, but as a moral agent. After writing the Critique of Pure Reason, Kant realized something powerful. If we cannot know the ultimate structure of reality, then morality cannot depend on what reality is. It must depend on what we are. This realization changed the direction of his entire project. The world of nature, the phenomenal world, is ruled by causation. Everything that happens is determined by previous events. If humans were only part of nature, then all our actions would be determined too. But Kant believed that morality requires something beyond nature, a realm where choice is possible. He turned to ethics because he saw that. Knowledge gives clarity, but morality gives dignity. Knowledge shows our limits, but morality shows our worth. Knowledge tells us what we cannot do. Morality tells us what we must do. Kant believed that even if we cannot know the nature of the soul, or God, or the universe, we can know what it means to act rightly. Philosophy, he thought, must ultimately guide how we live. And so Kant entered the realm of ethics, not to escape his earlier insights, but to complete them. Chapter 2. What makes an action good? One of Kant's most important questions is deceptively simple. What makes an action morally good? Before Kant, many philosophers looked at consequences. If an action produced good results, it was considered good. If it produced bad results, it was considered bad. Kant disagreed. He argued that consequences are unpredictable. We can intend good, yet bad may follow. We can intend harm, yet something good may come of it. So consequences can never be the foundation of morality. A morally good action, according to Kant, is not good because of what it achieves, but because of the principle behind it. He believed that a good action must come from a good will, be guided by reason, be based on universal principles, be done out of a sense of duty, not desire. This is why Kant famously said, "Nothing can be called good without qualification except a good will." A good will is not defined by results, but by the commitment to act from moral principles. If you help someone because you expect praise, the action may look good, but the intention is not moral. If you tell the truth because you fear punishment, the action is correct, but the motive is selfish. Morality begins when you act because it is right, not because you want something in return. For Kant, an action is good not when it benefits you, but when it honors the moral law within you. Chapter 3, Duty versus Desire. Here we reach one of the most challenging parts of Kant's ethics, the distinction between duty and desire. Kant did not believe desires were evil. He knew humans have emotions, needs, and natural inclinations. We seek happiness, comfort, safety, pleasure, connection. These desires are normal. But when morality is based on desire, it becomes unstable. Desires change. They conflict. They fade. They lead us in opposite directions. They cannot be universal. Duty, on the other hand, is stable. Duty is grounded in principles that apply to everyone. Kant believed, desire belongs to the phenomenal world. Duty belongs to the noumenal self. Desire is tied to nature. Duty is tied to freedom. Desire follows inclination. Duty follows reason. You are not free when you follow your desires, because desires are reactions to the world. You are free when you follow duties you give to yourself as a rational being. This distinction is not meant to remove emotion from life. It is meant to elevate morality beyond impulse and preference. For Kant, the highest moral acts are those done despite desire, when we choose what is right, even when we don't feel like it. Duty is not cold. It is courageous. It is the expression of your true, free self. Chapter 4. Acting from Moral Law. In Kant's ethical system, the moral law is not something outside you. It is not given by society, tradition, religion, or authority. It is something within you, a principle the rational self discovers through reflection. This law has two essential characteristics. 1. It is universal. A moral principle must apply to everyone, not just to you. If you expect others to follow it, you must follow it yourself. Kant expressed this through the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim, which you can at the same time will to become a universal law. If you lie whenever it benefits you, you must accept a world where everyone lies. In such a world, lying collapses, so the principle is contradictory. If you refuse to help others when you can, you must accept a world where no one helps you. That world contradicts human dignity and survival. The moral law is universal because morality cannot depend on personal advantage. 2. It treats every person as an end in themselves. No one may be used as a means to an end. Not you, not others. Every person has intrinsic worth. This second formulation of the moral law connects ethics to dignity. When you act from moral law, you are respecting both yourself and everyone else as free, rational beings. This is why Kant said, "Two things fill the mind with wonder, the starry sky above me and the moral law within me." The moral law is not a command imposed on you. It is your own reason giving direction to your will. It is the expression of the highest part of your nature. Chapter 5. Why Intention Matters. In most ethical systems, the outcome of an action is what matters most. But Kant saw something deeper. The value of an action lies in the intention behind it. This is not because intentions magically change reality. It is because morality is about the will, and the will is the only thing truly under your control. You cannot control how others respond, whether help succeeds, whether consequences align with your hopes, whether fate interferes. But you can control the principle behind your action, the purpose you aim to fulfill, your sincerity, your honesty, your commitment to doing right. If your intention is grounded in duty, your action has moral worth, even if the outcome is imperfect. If your intention is grounded in self-interest, your action lacks moral worth, even if the results are good. Intention matters because it reveals who you are. Consequences tell us what happened. Intention tells us why you acted. For Kant, the moral worth of an action is measured not by its success, but by its motive. This doesn't mean consequences are irrelevant. They matter for practical life, but they do not determine moral value. Morality begins when intention aligns with moral law, when you act not from habit, desire, fear, or reward, but from freedom. The purest actions come from a will strengthened by principle, guided by reason, and rooted in dignity. This is the beginning of Kant's moral philosophy, a system that bases ethics not on external rules, but on the inner integrity of the rational human being. Part 9. The Good Will. Chapter 1. The Only True Good. In all of Kant's philosophy, no idea shines more quietly and more powerfully than this. Nothing can be called good without qualification except a good will. It is a sentence that seems simple, yet behind it lies the entire architecture of Kant's moral universe. For Kant, intelligence is not inherently good. Power is not inherently good. Courage is not inherently good. Even happiness is not inherently good. All of these can be used for harm if the will behind them is corrupted. A good will, however, cannot be misused. It is the one thing in human life that remains good no matter the circumstances, no matter the consequences, no matter how the world responds. A good will is not about being gentle or pleasant. It is not about following rules mechanically. It is not about being perfect. A good will is a commitment, a decision to act from moral principle rather than from selfishness, fear, or convenience. It is the quiet strength of a person who tries to do what is right even when no one is watching, even when there is no reward, even when it costs something. This is the foundation of Kantian ethics. The value of a human being lies not in what they achieve, but in the sincerity of the will that guides their actions. The world may judge results, but morality judges intentions. And in the heart of a person who chooses what is right simply because it is right, Kant saw the highest form of goodness. Chapter 2. Freedom and Morality. Kant believed something extraordinary about freedom, something far deeper than ordinary ideas about doing whatever you want. He believed that freedom is not found in desire. Desires pull us, push us, tempt us, mislead us. They come from biology, habit, emotion, and environment. When you follow desire, you're not choosing. You are reacting. Kant believed that freedom begins when you act from principle instead of impulse. When your actions come from your rational self rather than from instinct. This is why he said, freedom is the capacity to begin a state of the world from oneself. Not from nature, not from impulse, not from convenience. From oneself, from one's rational will. Morality and freedom are inseparable for Kant. Without freedom, morality would be meaningless. Without morality, freedom will be chaos. When you choose an action because you believe it is your duty, not because you want it, not because you fear punishment, not because it benefits you, you step into the Noumenal Realm, the realm beyond causation, the realm where true freedom lives. Kant believed that every moral action is a small declaration of independence from the forces that usually control us. Freedom is not a feeling, it is a responsibility. Chapter 3. Will versus inclination. Kant believed that every moral struggle is a battle between two forces inside us. 1. Inclination. These are our desires: hunger, comfort, pride, fear, pleasure, avoidance, habit. Inclinations are not evil. They're simply the voices of nature inside us. But they're not reliable guides for morality because they shift constantly and serve only ourselves. 2. The will. This is the rational part of us, the part that can reflect, decide, and act on universal principles. The will asks, what is right? What can I will for everyone? What respects human dignity? And sometimes what is right does not align with what we desire. Kant believed that morality begins where inclination ends. If you help someone because you feel compassion, that is good, but it is not morally pure. If you help someone even when you do not feel like it, even when you're tired, annoyed, or afraid, that is moral, because you are acting not from inclination, but from will. This distinction is difficult because it demands honesty. We cannot hide from our motives. We must ask ourselves why we act and what principle guides us. Inclination is easy. Will is difficult, and it is the difficulty that makes morality possible. Chapter 4, Self-Mastery. Kant believed that the highest form of strength is not domination over others, but mastery over oneself. Self-mastery is the ability to follow reason even when desire pulls in another direction. It is the quiet discipline to choose the long-term good over the short-term pleasure. It is the courage to honor your principles even when no one else does. Self-mastery is not self-denial. It is self-respect. It is not coldness. It is clarity. It is not the rejection of emotion. It is the alignment of emotion with principle. Kant believed, the weak follow their desires. The strong follow their principles. Self-mastery is the bridge between the phenomenal self, shaped by nature, and the noumenal self, rooted in freedom. To act morally is to let the noumenal self guide the phenomenal body. This is the spiritual core of Kant's ethics. You are not your urges. You are not your impulses. You are not your habits. You are the will that chooses what to do with them. And through self-mastery, you reveal your true self. Chapter 5, The Inner Law. At the center of Kant's moral system is something quiet, powerful, and deeply personal, the inner moral law. This law is not written in any book. It is not given by society. It is not commanded by religion. It is not enforced by fear. It is the law that reason gives to itself. Every human being carries this law within them. The law that says you must tell the truth, even when lying is easier. The law that says you must keep your word, even when breaking it benefits you. The law that says all people deserve respect simply because they are rational beings. The inner law is invisible, yet it shapes the most important moments of life. It is the voice that whispers when everyone else is silent. It is the compass that points toward dignity, honor, and moral clarity. Kant believed that when we follow this law, we are not obeying an external force. We are obeying our truest nature. It is beautiful to think that morality is not imposed on us, but arises from within us. This is why Kant wrote one of his most famous lines. Two things fill the mind with wonder: the starry sky above me and the moral law within me. The universe is vast, but the human will is capable of acting from principles beyond nature, beyond desire, beyond causation. The inner law is the clearest evidence of autonomy. It shows that human dignity is not a reward, but an inherent part of what we are. And the good will, the will that acts from this inner law, is the highest expression of the human spirit. Part 10, The Categorical Imperative. Chapter 1, Universal Law. At the heart of Kant's moral philosophy lies one profound idea, a principle he believed could guide all ethical decision-making, regardless of culture, religion, desire, or circumstance. He called it the Categorical Imperative. To understand it, imagine that morality is not a set of rules given by society, nor a collection of traditions inherited from ancestors, nor an instinctive feeling that shifts with moods. For Kant, morality must come from reason alone, and reason must be universal. This means that a moral principle cannot be personal. It cannot apply only when convenient. It cannot change depending on who is affected. A true moral principle must hold everywhere, for everyone, at all times. Kant expressed this through the first and most famous formulation of the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim, which you can at the same time will to become a universal law. A maxim is simply the principle behind your action. Ask yourself, if everyone acted as I am about to act, would the world become better or worse? Would the principle remain meaningful? Would it contradict itself? If your principle cannot be universalized, it is not moral. This idea is powerful because it makes morality impartial. It removes selfishness from the equation. It requires you to judge your own behavior from a standpoint that includes every human being. In this way, Kant believed the categorical imperative is the purest expression of moral reason. Chapter 2. Can everyone do this? To understand universal law, Kant asks us to look at our actions not from our own perspective, but from a universal one. Take lying, for example. If you lie whenever it benefits you, you must accept a world where everyone lies. But in such a world, lying itself becomes useless. Promises lose meaning. Contracts collapse. Trust disappears. Communication breaks down. The principle destroys itself. So lying cannot be moral. Or consider breaking a promise. If everyone broke promises whenever it was convenient, the very concept of promising would vanish. A promise only makes sense in a world where people keep their word. So promise breaking cannot be moral. Or consider refusing to help someone in need. If no one ever helped others, you yourself could never rely on help. A world without mutual aid contradicts the conditions humans need to survive. So neglecting others cannot be moral. Universalization is not about predicting consequences. It's about asking whether your principle could be adopted by everyone without contradiction. Kant believed that morality requires a principle that could become a law for all rational beings. If it cannot be a universal rule, it cannot be right. This is a simple test, but not an easy one, because it demands honesty, humility, and the willingness to see your actions from a perspective larger than yourself. Chapter 3. Treating others as ends. Kant offers a second formulation of the categorical imperative, one even more human, even more emotional, even more profound. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never merely as a means. To treat someone as a means is to use them, to treat them as a tool, a resource, a stepping stone. To treat someone as an end is to recognize their dignity, to respect their freedom, their goals, their humanity. This idea is not sentimental. It is rational. Every person is a rational being with a will of their own, a will capable of choice, of intention, of moral action. Using a person for your benefit without respecting their autonomy is a violation of their nature as a rational being. This includes manipulation, deception, exploitation, coercion, emotional abuse, treating someone as an object or tool. For Kant, every person possesses intrinsic worth, not because of talent, wealth, beauty, intelligence, or status, but simply because they are capable of moral reasoning. Human dignity is universal. It cannot be earned. It cannot be taken away. It cannot be measured. This formulation of the categorical imperative is the basis of human rights, modern ethics, and the belief in the equality of all persons. To treat someone as an end is to honor their humanity, and in doing so, you honor your own. Chapter 4. Respect and dignity. Respect is not a feeling in Kant's ethics. It is not admiration. It is not politeness. It is not affection. Respect is a principle, a recognition that every person possesses moral worth. When you respect someone, you acknowledge them as a free being with their own goals, their own desires, their own rationality. Respect requires restraint. It requires patience. It requires honesty. Kant believed that dignity is the value that cannot be traded for anything else. Objects have a price. People have dignity. You can replace a broken tool. You cannot replace a human life. Dignity is not based on happiness or success. It is based on the capacity for moral action, the ability to choose what is right. This is why Kant's ethics is so strict. It demands that we never treat others as disposable, replaceable, or inferior. Even when someone behaves poorly, even when we disagree with them, even when they hurt us, their dignity remains intact. Because dignity belongs not to their behavior, but to their humanity. This idea is the foundation of justice, equality, and moral responsibility. Respect means recognizing that everyone carries the same inner law you do, the same capacity for goodness, the same potential for freedom. When you respect others, you reaffirm the moral world itself. Chapter 5. Morality Beyond Emotion. For Kant, morality is rooted not in feeling, but in reason. This does not mean emotions are unimportant. Kant knew emotions can guide us, motivate us, and enrich our lives. But emotions cannot be the foundation of morality. Why? Because emotions change from day to day, vary from person to person, conflict with each other, do not apply universally, arise from nature, not freedom. If morality were based on emotion, it would collapse the moment we stop feeling motivated. Kant believed to be moral is to act from principles, not from moods, from duty, not from desire. This does not make morality cold. It makes morality stable. Emotions can inspire moral action, but only reason can justify it. When someone acts morally despite fear, despite anger, despite temptation, despite exhaustion, that person demonstrates true moral strength. Morality beyond emotion is morality grounded in the will that chooses what is right because it is right. Kant believed that such actions express the highest part of our nature. They express autonomy, the ability to govern oneself by laws one rationally embraces. They express dignity, the recognition of oneself and others as free, rational beings. They express freedom, the freedom to rise above desire, impulse, and circumstance. And they express humanity, not the fragile, emotional humanity shaped by fear and longing, but the principled, resilient humanity capable of moral greatness. This is morality beyond emotion, a morality built on clarity, on reason, and on the unshakable dignity of the human will. Part 11. Human Freedom. Chapter 1. Freedom as a Moral Condition. For Kant, freedom is not an optional feature of human life. It is not a luxury. It is not something that may or may not exist depending on circumstances. Freedom, he insisted, is a moral condition. This means that morality is impossible without freedom. To hold someone responsible for their actions, to praise or blame them, to expect them to follow moral laws, all of this requires that they are free. If every action were determined by nature, by instinct, biology, emotion, or environment, then people could not be held accountable. A person who acts only from impulse is not truly choosing. A person who acts only from desire is not directing themselves. A person controlled by fear is not acting from principle. For Kant, freedom is not the absence of obstacles. It is the presence of self-governance. You are free not when nothing stands in your way, but when your will guides your action. Freedom means the ability to act from reason, the ability to follow universal moral law, the ability to choose the right thing, the ability to govern oneself, the ability to resist impulse. Morality requires this kind of freedom, a freedom rooted not in desire, but in dignity. This is why Kant said, a free will and a will under moral laws are the same. Only a free being can act morally. Only a moral being is truly free. Freedom is not the opposite of duty. Freedom is what makes duty possible. Chapter 2. Autonomy versus Slavery. Kant's idea of freedom is built on a profound distinction, autonomy versus slavery. But this is not slavery in the political or historical sense. This is moral slavery, a condition in which the self is ruled by forces outside of reason. Autonomy. Autonomy means self-rule. It means giving yourself the law you follow. It means acting from principles you rationally choose. An autonomous person is not controlled by social pressure, personal fear, emotional impulse, habit, instinct, desire. They act from reason, from their highest self. Slavery. Moral slavery is not the chains placed on the body. It is the chains placed on the will. You are enslaved when you cannot resist temptation. You let desire control you. You obey fear instead of principle. You act only for reward. You behave without thinking. You allow others to dictate your values. You chase pleasure at the cost of dignity. Kant believed that many people live in moral slavery without ever realizing it. They obey impulses rather than the moral law within. They follow habits rather than principles. They seek approval rather than truth. They drift rather than choose. Autonomy is not easy. It requires discipline, reflection, and strength. But it is the only path to true moral life. To be autonomous is to be responsible for oneself, to live not like a machine reacting to stimuli, but like a being capable of shaping its own destiny. Autonomy is freedom. Slavery is the loss of self. Chapter 3. The Self-Given Law. Kant believed something remarkable. The only laws that can truly bind you are the laws you give yourself. But this is not an invitation to selfishness. He does not mean you can create whatever rules you like. He means that moral law must come from reason, and reason is universal. When you act morally, you are obeying a law that your rational nature creates, a law that applies not only to you, but to all rational beings. This is the essence of the categorical imperative. A law must come from a will that could be universal. So when you act from moral principle, you're not submitting to something imposed on you. You are living according to your truest self, your rational, autonomous self. We can imagine morality as a kind of inner parliament. Desire proposes actions. Emotion demands satisfaction. Fear tries to interrupt. Habit pushes toward ease. But reason casts the final vote. And the vote must be based on universal principle. This law, the law grounded in reason, the law that could be followed by all, is the law that the moral self gives to itself. This is why Kant's ethics is often called self-legislation. You are not obeying someone else's rules. You are obeying yourself in the highest sense of the word. To follow the moral law is not to lose freedom. It is to express it. Chapter 4. Kant on choice. Choice, for Kant, is not about selecting between pleasures. It is not about preference. It is not about what feels good. Choice is the moment when the self confronts itself. When you choose between doing what is easy and doing what is right, you reveal your character. Kant believed that every moral choice is an opportunity to step into the noumenal world, the world of freedom, dignity, and responsibility. So what does it mean to choose? It means to act from reasons, not reactions. It means to ask yourself, can this principle be universalized? Does this action respect the dignity of others? Am I acting from autonomy or from impulse? Am I treating others as ends or as means? Am I obeying the inner law? Choice is where the two worlds of Kant's philosophy meet. The phenomenal world of events and causes. The noumenal world of freedom and morality. When you choose morally, you rise above nature and act from reason. That moment of choice is a moment of transcendence. It is the point where you stop being a product of circumstances and become an author of your life. Kant believed that this ability, the ability to choose morally, is what gives humans their unique worth. Chapter 5. The Noumenal Self. In Kant philosophy, every person has two selves. 1. The empirical self. This is the self you see in the world of appearances. It is shaped by biology, environment, emotion, desire, habit, experience, external circumstances. This self exists in time and is subject to causation. 2. The noumenal self. This is the self as it exists beyond experience. It is the source of freedom, autonomy, moral responsibility, rational will, dignity. The noumenal self is not determined by nature. It does not belong to the chain of cause and effect. It belongs to a realm beyond time, the realm where freedom is possible. You never see the noumenal self. You cannot describe it. You cannot measure it. But you live through it every time you choose an action based on moral principle. When you act morally, you reveal the noumenal self, the true self. This is why Kant believed the moral law reveals a world not visible to the senses. The noumenal self is the foundation of human dignity. It shows that humans are not merely animals following instinct. They are free beings capable of rising above nature through reason, autonomy, and moral courage. And this freedom, quiet, invisible, internal, is what makes each person infinitely valuable. Part 12. Why Morality Must Be Universal. Chapter 1. No Exceptions. For Kant, the very heart of morality lies in one bold principle. There can be no exceptions. When you choose a moral rule, you're choosing it not only for yourself, but for every human being. This is why Kant said that a moral law must be universal. It must apply to everyone equally, in every circumstance, without special conditions. If you allow yourself an exception, you destroy the law itself. If you lie just this once, you must accept that everyone may lie just this once. If you break a promise because it benefits you, you must accept that everyone else may break their promises. If you refuse to help someone because you feel busy, you must accept a world where no one helps you when you are in need. A moral rule with exceptions is not a moral rule at all. It is merely a preference. Kant believed that the moment you treat yourself as more special than others, morality collapses. Moral laws are not about convenience. They are not about personal advantage. They are about acting from a principle that you could will for all people. This is why morality must be universal, because universality protects fairness, justice, and dignity. Without universality, morality dissolves into chaos. Chapter 2. Rules versus Consequences. Most ethical systems in human history have judged actions by their consequences. If something produces good results, it is considered right. If it produces harm, it is considered wrong. Kant believed something very different. He argued that consequences can never be the foundation of morality because consequences are unpredictable. You may intend good and cause harm. You may intend harm and accidentally create good. So an action's morality cannot depend on outcomes beyond your control. Kant shifts morality from the realm of consequences to the realm of reasons. For him, the morality of an action depends entirely on the principle behind it. Did you act from duty? Did you act from reason? Did you act from a universal law? Did you treat others with dignity? Kant's ethics are like the rules of logic. They cannot be violated for convenience. They cannot be bent for personal benefit. They cannot change depending on mood or circumstance. This is why Kant often sounds strict. He is not strict because he is harsh. He is strict because morality must remain stable. A rule that bends with emotion ceases to be a rule. A principle that depends on outcomes ceases to be a principle. Morality must come from reason, not from what happens after the action, but from the will that produces it. Chapter 3. Equality of Persons. Kant believed that every human being has a dignity that cannot be measured, bought, or erased. This dignity comes from one thing: the ability to act for moral reason. Not intelligence, not power, not wealth, not beauty, not social status. Dignity is universal because rationality is universal. This is why morality must be universal, because all moral laws must treat each person as an equal participant in moral life. When you choose a principle for yourself, you choose it for everyone. This protects the weak from the strong, the poor from the powerful, the vulnerable from exploitation, the individual from injustice. Kant believes that every rational being is a citizen of a moral world, a world governed not by desire, but by law. This moral world has no kings, no slaves, no superiors, no inferiors. Every person stands alongside every other, equal in value, equal in dignity, equal in moral responsibility. This vision of equality is one of Kant's greatest contributions to humanity. Many of the modern ideas we take for granted, human rights, civil rights, universal justice, are rooted in Kant's belief that morality must treat every person equally. Chapter 4. The Logic of Ethics. Why must moral rules be universal? Kant believed the answer is not emotional, it is logical. Morality must be universal because moral reasoning requires consistency. Kant believed that moral arguments must meet the same standards as mathematical or logical ones. They must avoid contradiction. They must apply equally. They must hold in all similar cases. They must be grounded in reason. They must not depend on personal desires. If you make an exception for yourself, you're breaking the logic of ethics. If you say, "I may lie, but others must tell the truth," You are contradicting yourself. The rule cannot survive the exception. If you say, I may steal when I need to, you are destroying the concept of property. The rule collapses under its own weight. If you say, I may manipulate others for my benefit, you are treating others as means while expecting them to treat you as an end. This is logically inconsistent. For Kant, a moral law is like a law of reason. It must hold universally or not at all. This is why morality must be universal. Because without universality, morality loses coherence. Chapter 5. Why Kant Rejects Relativism. Moral relativism is the idea that morality depends on culture, opinion, or situation. That what is right for one group may not be right for another. That morality is flexible, negotiable, subjective. Kant rejected this completely. He believed that moral relativism destroys dignity. If morality depends on culture, then cruelty becomes acceptable if a culture endorses it. If morality depends on convenience, then injustice becomes acceptable when it benefits those in power. If morality depends on personal preference, then truth becomes meaningless because each person creates their own version of it. Kant believed that morality must come from reason, which is the same in all humans. Morality must be universal because reason is universal. This is why Kant rejects relativism. It makes morality subjective. It allows injustice. It undermines human dignity. It destroys equality. It collapses into contradiction. It provides no stable guide for action. Kant believed that every person in every culture, in every era, shares the same basic rational structure. And therefore, every person is bound by the same moral laws. Morality is not a matter of taste. It is not a matter of preference. It is not a matter of tradition. Morality is the expression of reason, and reason requires universality. To respect this universality is to respect humanity itself. This is why Kant believed that morality must be universal, because only universality protects freedom, dignity, justice, and the moral law within us. Part 13. Happiness and Duty. Chapter 1. Happiness isn't the goal. Most ethical systems in human history, from ancient Greece to modern psychology, have placed happiness at the center of human life. Happiness, they say, is the ultimate purpose. Happiness is what gives meaning to our choices. Happiness is the measure of a life well lived. Kant disagreed. He did not believe happiness was irrelevant. He did not deny that humans naturally seek comfort, pleasure, and fulfillment. But Kant saw something deeper. Happiness cannot be the foundation of morality. Why? Because happiness is different for every person. One person's joy might be another's misery. Desires change. Pleasures fade. Circumstances shift. The things that make us happy today may feel empty tomorrow. If morality is built on happiness, then morality becomes unpredictable, as unstable as our emotions. Kant believed that morality must be grounded not in what makes us feel good, but in what is right, universal, and rational. Happiness can be part of a good life, but it cannot define a good life. This is why Kant wrote, "It is impossible to conceive anything in the world, or even out of it, that can be called good without qualification, except a good will." Happiness is a gift of nature, but goodness, true goodness, comes only from the moral will. Chapter 2. Why Duty Matters More. For Kant, duty is the core of moral life. Duty is not punishment. Duty is not harshness. Duty is not cold obedience. Duty is the recognition that there is a higher law inside us, a law we choose for ourselves as rational beings. Duty matters more than happiness because happiness is personal, but duty is universal. Duty is the bridge between the self and the moral world. When you act from duty, you act from principle. You act from reason. You act from respect for others. You act from the moral law. You act freely. Duty means, I do this because it is right, not because it benefits me. Kant believed that the greatest moral acts often involve sacrifice, moments when you choose the right thing, even when it conflicts with desire. To act from duty is to rise above appetite and become a moral agent. It is the moment when your will aligns with the inner law, not with your impulses. And this, for Kant, is the highest expression of human dignity. Chapter 3. Pure versus impure motivation. Kant's ethics draw a sharp distinction between pure and impure motives. Impure motives. These are motives tied to desire, fear, reward, habit, comfort, or self-interest. An action may look moral, but if the motive is impure, it has no moral worth. For example, telling the truth to avoid trouble, helping someone to impress others, giving money to feel superior, being kind to receive praise. These are not immoral actions, but they are not moral in Kant's sense either. They are guided by the world, not by reason. Pure motives. A pure moral motive is simple, acting from duty because the action is right, not because you feel like it, not because it benefits you, not because it avoids guilt, not because you want approval, but because a rational being can will this principle universally. Purity of motive matters because morality is grounded in the will, the part of you that chooses freely. A pure intention comes from your rational self, not from your emotions or desires. And Kant believed that when a human being acts from a pure moral intention, they reveal something extraordinary, the power to govern oneself by principles that dignity demands. Chapter 4. Moral worth. So what gives an action moral worth? Not the results, not the feelings involved, not the approval of others. Moral worth comes from one thing: acting from duty. Imagine two people help a stranger. One helps because it feels good. The other helps because it is right. Both actions are beneficial. Both produce good consequences. Both are appreciated. But only one has moral worth. Because moral worth, in Kant's system, belongs only to actions performed from respect for the moral law. This does not mean the first person is bad. It means their action expresses natural kindness, not moral duty. Moral worth appears when the will lifts itself above inclination. When someone acts rightly even when they are tired, frustrated, tempted, afraid, or emotionally conflicted. These moments, where duty triumphs over desire, are where Kant sees the true strength of the human spirit. The moral worth of an action is not measured by the world. It is measured by the will. Chapter 5. Kant's view of joy. It may seem, at first glance, that Kant's philosophy leaves little room for joy. His focus on duty, discipline, and principle can sound stern, as if morality demands the suppression of happiness. But this is a misunderstanding. Kant did not reject joy. He made joy deeper. He believed in a joy that is not dependent on pleasure, not fragile like emotion, not tied to circumstances. He believed in a joy that comes from self-respect, from knowing you acted rightly. A joy born from the harmony between your will and your principles. This joy is calm, steady, quiet. It is the joy of being true to yourself at the deepest level. Kant believed that happiness, when combined with virtue, becomes meaningful and complete. This is why he spoke of the highest good, a state where virtue is perfect and happiness aligns with virtue. We may not always achieve this in life, but we can move toward it. Kant's joy is not loud. It is not ecstatic. It is not dependent on luck. Kant's joy is the inner peace that comes when you live according to reason, freedom, and dignity. A joy that does not fade because it is rooted in the moral law within. Part 14. Kant on evil. Chapter 1. Radical evil. Kant believed something unsettling about human nature, something far more complex than simple good or bad. He believed that every human being carries within them the capacity for radical evil. This does not mean that people are monsters or that cruelty is our natural state. Instead, Kant means that humans possess a deep inner tendency to prioritize themselves over the moral law. Radical evil is not a force outside us. It is not a demon, not a supernatural darkness, not a mythic corruption. Radical evil is the quiet decision to put personal desire above universal duty. It is the willingness to make oneself the exception to the moral law, to treat others as means when it is convenient, to bend principles when they become uncomfortable. Radical evil is radical because it grows from the root of human freedom. It comes from the same place as goodness, the will. We are capable of moral greatness and of moral failure for the same reason. We are free. Kant believed that evil is possible not because humans are broken, but because humans must choose between inclination and moral law. The possibility of evil is the price of freedom. Chapter 2. How people deceive themselves. Kant believed that most evil does not come from open cruelty. It comes from self-deception. People often do not say, "I will do something wrong." Instead, they tell themselves, "This is fine just this once. No one will know. My situation is special. I deserve this exception. This rule doesn't apply to me. The moral law is good, but not right now." This is how evil grows quietly, not from hatred, but from rationalizing behavior that contradicts moral duty. We hide our motives even from ourselves. We present selfishness as practicality. We disguise convenience as necessity. We call desire moral insight. Kant believed that human beings are remarkably skilled at lying to themselves. We twist principles to suit our inclinations. We turn exceptions into temporary freedoms. We confuse our impulses with our conscience. Evil advances not through great acts of obvious wrongdoing, but through the gradual erosion of our inner honesty. Self-deception is the mechanism through which radical evil enters the soul. Chapter 3. The 3 Grades of Evil. Kant believed that evil appears in human life in 3 progressively deeper forms. These grades show how the will moves away from the moral law. 1. Frailty, weakness. Here, a person knows the moral law, recognizes it, even wants to follow it, but their inclinations overpower them. They violate duty not because they reject it, but because they lack strength. This is the most common form of evil. It is human weakness. 2. Impurity, mixed motives. Here, a person does follow the moral law, but not from pure intention. They mix moral motives with selfish ones, doing good for praise, helping others to feel superior, acting kind to gain trust, telling the truth out of fear, not duty. The action looks moral, but the motive is impure. The will is divided. 3. Wickedness, evil principle. This is the deepest form. Here, a person does not simply fail in weakness or mixed motives. Instead, they invert the moral order. They place self-interest above the moral law as a conscious principle. This does not mean open villainy. It often appears as sophisticated justification. My interests matter more than others. Morality is useful sometimes, not always. I can ignore the law when it benefits me. Wickedness is the decision to make inclination the ruler and duty the servant. It is a fundamental corruption of the will. These 3 grades show the subtle ways evil integrates itself into human life, and they show why moral effort is necessary. Chapter 4. The Struggle Within. For Kant, the human soul is a battlefield, not a battlefield between supernatural forces, but a battlefield within the will, between inclination and duty. Inclination pulls us toward comfort, pleasure, avoidance, and ease. Duty pulls us toward principle, justice, truth, and dignity. This struggle is constant. It does not end. It does not resolve forever. It renews itself each time we face a moral decision. Kant believed that every moral act is an act of self-conquest. To do what is right, when you also desire what is wrong, is evidence of a will that rises above nature. This is why morality is never automatic. It requires discipline. It requires reflection. It requires honesty. It requires strength. The presence of struggle does not mean failure. It means humanity. Evil does not win when you feel temptation. Evil wins when you stop struggling against it. Goodness is not effortless. Goodness is effortful, because the will must constantly reassert its rule over inclination. Kant believed that the struggle itself is a sign of moral growth. Chapter 5. Why goodness requires effort. Why does goodness demand so much effort? Because the moral law is universal, but inclination is personal. Desire asks, what is good for me? Duty asks, what is right for all? Desire asks, what do I want? Duty asks, what should I do? Desire seeks ease. Duty seeks justice. Kant believed that goodness requires effort because acting from principle means rising above. Fear, habit, convenience, comfort, emotion, impulse. Morality is not natural to humans. Instinct is natural. Emotion is natural. Impulse is natural. But morality is an achievement, a triumph of the rational self over the animal self. This does not make morality cold. It makes it noble. To act morally is to declare, I'm not just a creature of nature. I'm a free being. I choose my principles. I govern myself. Goodness requires effort because freedom requires effort. And freedom, true freedom, the freedom of the autonomous will, is the highest expression of human dignity. Kant believed that each moral act is a small victory for the noumenal self, the free self, the self beyond the chains of desire. Goodness is not easy. Goodness is earned through every moment when the will chooses principle over impulse. And in that effort, Kant believed the human being shines. Part 15, Practical Reason. Chapter 1, Reason in Action. Kant believed that reason is not just a tool for thinking. It is a tool for living. Theoretical reason helps us understand the world, how nature works, why things move, how events follow each other, and what can be known through experience. But practical reason is different. Practical reason is the part of the mind that asks, what should I do? How should I live? What is the right choice? What kind of person should I be? Practical reason is reason translated into action. It steps beyond observation and enters the realm of decision, the realm where desire and duty collide, where freedom declares itself, where morality becomes real. Kant believed that practical reason is the highest expression of human nature because it shows the capacity of the will to govern itself. Animals act from instinct. Machines act from programming. But human beings can act from principles they understand and choose. Practical reason is the silent guide that allows you to turn your values into choices, your beliefs into actions, your intentions into reality. It is reason, not emotion, not habit, not impulse, that gives life its direction. Chapter 2, Moral Decision-Making. For Kant, moral decision-making is not about guessing consequences or calculating outcomes. It is about examining the principle behind your action. When faced with a moral choice, practical reason asks, can I will the principle behind this action to be a universal law? Does this action respect the dignity of others? Am I treating people as ends or as means? Is my intention pure, based on duty rather than desire? These questions do not require special knowledge. They do not require complex philosophy. They require honesty. Moral decision-making, for Kant, is an exercise in clarity. It is about stepping back from the chaos of impulse, the pull of emotion, the convenience of shortcuts, and seeing your action from the perspective of reason. Kant believed that the hardest part of moral life is not knowing what is right. It is doing it even when your desires pull you elsewhere. Practical reason gives you the ability to pause between impulse and action. In that pause, the will awakens. The self asserts itself. Freedom becomes possible. A moral decision, for Kant, is never just a choice. It is a statement about who you are. Chapter 3, Freedom Through Law. At first, Kant's claim might sound strange. True freedom is found in obeying moral law. Most people associate freedom with doing whatever they want, going wherever they desire, indulging in whatever they feel. Kant believed the opposite. He believed that following desire is not freedom. It is slavery to impulse. When your actions are dictated by hunger, anger, fear, pride, pleasure, comfort, habit, you are not leading your life. You're being led by forces that are not truly you. Freedom, for Kant, is the ability to act from principles you have given yourself. Moral law is not an external command. It is the expression of autonomy. When you act from duty, you are not obeying something outside you. You are obeying the rational will within you. This is why Kant believed a free will and a will under moral law are the same. Freedom is not the absence of law. Freedom is living according to the law that your own reason sets. This law does not limit you. It liberates you from the tyranny of your impulses. It frees you to act with integrity, to choose with clarity, to live with dignity. Moral law is the path that leads the will out of nature and into freedom. Chapter 4, Inner Strength. Practical reason, for Kant, is the source of inner strength. Many people imagine strength as physical force, emotional intensity, or the ability to dominate others. Kant's view is different. Inner strength is the ability to resist temptation, to act from principle, to uphold duty despite fear, to choose the difficult right, to remain steady in uncertainty, to silence selfish impulses, to remain honest with oneself. This strength is quiet. It is invisible. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It appears in moments when you tell the truth even when a lie is easier. You keep a promise even when it costs you. You help someone even when you feel tired. You refuse to harm even when anger demands it. You act ethically even when no one will know. This strength is not given by nature. It is developed through the steady work of practical reason. Each time you choose duty over desire, you will become stronger. Each time you follow moral law, you build the architecture of your character. Inner strength is the quiet victory of the noumenal self over the phenomenal world. It is the triumph of freedom over inclination. Chapter 5, Why Reason Guides Life. Kant believed that a life guided by reason is not a dry or emotionless life. It is a meaningful life. Reason does not replace emotion, but it organizes it. Reason does not silence desire, but it directs it. Reason does not suppress humanity, but elevates it. Reason is the compass that shows you the difference between what you want and what is worthy of wanting. Without reason, desires conflict, impulses dominate, emotions take control, life becomes chaotic, choices become inconsistent, dignity dissolves. Reason gives structure to the moral life. Reason asks, what is right? Desire asks, what feels good? Reason asks, what respects dignity? Impulse asks, what is easiest? Reason asks, what principle can guide all people? Habit asks, what have I always done? To live by reason is to live awake. It is to see clearly in moments where emotion blurs vision. It is to anchor yourself in principles that do not change with circumstance. Reason guides life because it connects you to something larger than yourself, the universal moral law. Through practical reason, you live not as a creature of desire, but as a citizen of a moral world. Not as an animal driven by instinct, but as a being capable of acting from freedom, from dignity, and from the profound power of the rational will. This is why Kant believed that practical reason is the highest expression of what it means to be human. It is the light by which the will walks its path, and it is the force that transforms the human being from a passenger of nature into an author of their own moral life. Part 16, The Soul According to Kant. Chapter 1, Can we know the soul? Throughout history, philosophers, theologians, and poets have tried to describe the soul. Some called it immortal. Some called it divine. Some called it the true self. But Kant approached the soul differently. He believed that the soul, like God and the ultimate nature of the universe, belongs to a realm beyond experience. We never see the soul. We never touch it. We never observe it the way we observe objects in space and time. Space and time themselves are not properties of the soul, because the soul belongs to the noumenal world. So Kant asked a simple, honest question. Can the human mind know the soul as a thing in itself? His answer was equally honest. No, not through reason, not through experience, not through theoretical knowledge. We experience thoughts, feelings, memories, choices, but never the self behind them. The soul is not an object of knowledge. It is an idea, a necessary idea, that helps us make sense of our inner life. Kant was not denying the soul. He was protecting it from the illusions of speculative reasoning. The soul exists in a way we cannot fully grasp, because it exists beyond the conditions that make understanding possible. The soul, for Kant, is not something we know. It is something we presuppose in order to understand our experience. Chapter 2, immortality as a postulate. Since Kant believed we cannot know the soul through reason, the question arises, is immortality just a dream? Kant said something remarkable. The immortality of the soul cannot be proven, but morality gives us a reason to believe in it. This is what Kant called a postulate of practical reason, a belief justified not by theoretical evidence, but by moral necessity. Why? Because morality demands that we aim for a perfect alignment between our will and moral law. But in this life, we never reach perfect moral development. We're always growing, struggling, fighting against impulse, working to purify our motives. This lifelong journey seems incomplete. So Kant argued, if moral perfection is a rational goal, and if humans can endlessly progress toward it, then the soul must continue beyond death. Immortality is not knowledge. It is hope grounded in moral life. The idea of the soul's immortality gives meaning to the endless effort to become better, kinder, purer, and more aligned with the moral law. Immortality is the horizon toward which moral striving reaches. We do not know it, we hope it. And for Kant, this hope has dignity. Chapter 3. Why the Soul Matters Ethically. Even though Kant insists we cannot know the soul scientifically, he also insists that the soul is essential to moral life. Why? Because morality requires that we view ourselves not merely as physical beings subject to nature, emotion, biology, and circumstance, but as rational beings capable of freedom. Without the soul, the noumenal self, there is no place for moral responsibility. The soul matters because it is the source of free will. It is where intention arises. It is where duty originates. It is the eye behind every decision. It is what distinguishes persons from objects. It is the foundation of dignity. If humans were only physical beings, every action would be determined by chemistry, environment, instinct, and impulse. But the soul, the rational, noumenal self, is the basis for autonomy. It is what makes moral life possible. This is why Kant says that the soul is not an object of knowledge, but the presupposition of moral existence. The soul matters ethically because without it, human life loses responsibility, freedom, and dignity. Chapter 4. The Inner Person. Kant believed that each of us has two selves. 1. The empirical self. This is the self we observe. Our habits, emotions, fears, desires, talents, limitations. It is shaped by nature, and it exists in time. The empirical self is the part of us that grows, ages, reacts, and changes. 2. The inner person, the noumenal self. This is the self beyond nature. The self that chooses, the self that reasons, the self that gives itself moral law. It is invisible. It cannot be measured. It does not appear in space or time. But it is the real self in the moral sense, the self responsible for action. Kant believed that every time we act from duty, we reveal the inner person. Every time we choose the right thing against impulse, fear, or selfish desire, we show the presence of the noumenal self. The inner person is not defined by the accidents of birth, personality, or circumstance. The inner person is defined by freedom, responsibility, and moral will. This is why Kant believed that every human being, regardless of strength, talent, intelligence, or wealth, possesses equal dignity. Because every human being possesses this inner, rational self. Not everyone uses it equally. Not everyone listens to it frequently. But everyone has it. And this fact is the foundation of moral equality. Chapter 5. Hope Beyond Reason. Kant's philosophy contains hard limits. We cannot know God. We cannot know the soul. We cannot know ultimate reality. But Kant is not a philosopher of despair. He is a philosopher of hope grounded in reason. He believed that the soul connects us to a dimension of human existence that reason cannot describe, but morality cannot ignore. The soul points to the possibility of freedom, the possibility of moral growth, the possibility of immortality, the possibility of a deeper moral order. Hope is not knowledge. Hope is not wishful thinking. Hope, for Kant, is the bridge between reason's limits and morality's demands. We cannot know the soul, but we can hope in it. We cannot prove immortality, but we can live as if our moral striving belongs to a larger journey. We cannot perceive the noumenal self, but we can act from it every time we choose principle over desire. Hope does not replace knowledge. It completes it. Kant believed that when reason reaches its boundary, hope begins. And in that space beyond knowledge, human dignity finds its deepest meaning. The soul is not an object we can grasp. It is a horizon we walk toward, a reminder that the human being is more than nature, more than impulse, more than circumstance. The soul is the silent promise that our moral efforts matter in a way deeper than we can see. It is hope beyond reason, hope grounded in the dignity of the rational will and the mystery of the noumenal realm. Part 17, God in Kant's System. Chapter 1, Why Reason Can't Prove God. Throughout history, philosophers and theologians tried to prove God's existence with logic. The universe must have a first cause. Perfection must come from a perfect being. Morality requires a divine judge. But Kant looked at these arguments with clarity and honesty, and he concluded something bold. Reason cannot prove that God exists. Reason cannot prove that God does not exist. Reason cannot reach God at all. Why? Because God, if God exists, belongs to the noumenal realm, the realm beyond space, time, and causation. Reason works only within the phenomenal world, the world shaped by our minds. To know God theoretically, we would need to step outside the structure of human cognition. We would need to see as a divine being sees. We would need to think without space or time. This is impossible. So Kant dismantles the traditional proofs of God, not to destroy faith, but to protect it from false certainty. He wanted to show that reason has limits, and God stands beyond those limits. For Kant, God is not an object of knowledge. God is an idea that reason cannot grasp and experience cannot reveal. But this is not the end of God in Kant's system. It is the beginning of a deeper approach. Chapter 2, God as Moral Necessity. Even though Kant believes reason cannot prove God, he introduces a powerful concept. God is a postulate of practical reason. This means we do not know God exists because of logic or evidence. We believe God exists because morality makes the idea necessary. Here's how that works. We are commanded by moral law. We strive to align our will with duty. We aim for moral perfection. We believe that goodness should ultimately lead to happiness. But in this world, moral perfection is never complete, and happiness is not fairly distributed. Good people suffer. Bad people flourish. Justice does not always appear. Kant believed that morality demands a world where virtue and happiness are ultimately harmonized. But that world is not this world. So morality requires a realm beyond this one, afterlife, a moral governor God, an immortal soul, a future where justice is fulfilled. We do not know these truths. We need them for morality to make sense. God becomes a moral necessity, not as a scientific claim, but as the structure that makes moral striving meaningful. This is the foundation of Kant's unique approach. God is not proved. God is required by the demands of ethical existence. Chapter 3, The Highest Good. Kant believed that morality aims at something called the highest good, German, das Höchstgut. The highest good is the perfect union of virtue, a morally perfect will, and happiness, the deserved reward of such virtue. In ordinary life, these two do not align. The virtuous person may suffer. The selfish person may prosper. Happiness does not always follow morality. But Kant believed that morality commands us to strive toward a world where goodness is rewarded and happiness matches virtue. This moral demand implies three necessary ideas. 1. Immortality of the soul, because moral perfection cannot be achieved in a single lifetime. 2. Freedom, because morality requires genuine choice. 3. God, because only a supreme moral being can ensure the final harmony between virtue and happiness. Without God, the highest good loses coherence. The moral world becomes incomplete. Kant is not saying God exists because we want him to. He is saying the moral law within us points toward a moral order beyond us. The highest good is a horizon, a direction for moral striving. God is the necessary condition for that horizon to make sense. Chapter 4. Hope and Morality. Kant's approach to God is deeply connected to hope. Hope is not naive optimism. Hope is not blind belief. Hope is not emotional comfort. For Kant, hope is the bridge between moral duty and the limits of reason. We cannot know the ultimate meaning of the universe. We cannot know the nature of the soul. We cannot know God directly. But we can hope because morality requires hope. Moral life demands that justice matters, that goodness has meaning, that freedom is real, that moral effort is not wasted. These demands are not theoretical. They are practical, rooted in the way we must live if we take morality seriously. Hope fills the space between human limitation and moral aspiration. Through hope, Kant gives spiritual dimension to a philosophy grounded in reason. Hope does not contradict reason. Hope completes reason where reason reaches its boundary. A person guided by Kant's ethics does not claim to know God exists. They claim that hope in God gives moral life coherence. Hope strengthens morality the way light strengthens a path. Chapter 5. Kant's Unique Theism. Kant's view of God is unlike traditional religious faith and unlike atheistic skepticism. It is something in between, or rather above both. His theism has 4 unique features. 1. God is not knowable through reason. All attempts to prove God fail because they try to use tools that cannot reach beyond experience. 2. God is a moral idea, not a theoretical one. God belongs to the realm of practical reason, to morality, not metaphysics. 3. God gives purpose to moral striving. Without God, the highest good is impossible. With God, the moral universe becomes intelligible. For God is a symbol of moral order, not a being we can describe, but a principle that grounds the meaning of duty, freedom, and justice. Kant's God is not anthropomorphic, not a cosmic engineer, not a metaphysical answer to scientific questions. Kant's God is a moral horizon, a necessary hope, the ultimate condition of ethical life, the point where the moral law and the structure of the universe touch each other. Kant does not say, you must believe in God. He says, if you take morality seriously, you will find yourself hoping that the moral world has a foundation. God becomes the background presence that allows human dignity and moral striving to hold meaning. It is a unique theism, not imposed, not dogmatic, not assertive. It is the theism of a mind that respects the limits of knowledge, yet refuses to let moral effort fade into meaninglessness. In Kant's universe, God is not the conclusion of an argument. God is the quiet, necessary light behind the moral law within us. Part 18, Kant on Beauty. Chapter 1, The Critique of Judgment. After exploring knowledge in the critique of pure reason and morality in the critique of practical reason, Kant turned to something softer, quieter, and yet just as profound. Beauty. He devoted an entire work to it, the critique of judgment. Why would a philosopher so concerned with duty, law, and reason turn his attention to something as delicate as beauty? Because Kant realized that beauty occupies a unique space in human life. It is not a desire, not a moral command, not an object of knowledge, and yet it touches every person deeply, in every culture, in every age. Beauty cannot be measured. Beauty cannot be proven. Beauty cannot be possessed. Yet beauty moves us, comforts us, inspires us. Kant believed that beauty reveals something about the structure of human consciousness, a harmony between imagination and understanding, a moment where the mind feels at home in the world. Beauty, for Kant, is not about decoration. It is an encounter with meaning that transcends both thought and desire. And so, with the same patience and clarity that he brought to knowledge and morality, Kant began to explain the quiet power of beauty. Chapter 2. What makes something beautiful? Kant asked a question that seems simple on the surface. What makes something beautiful? Is it color, shape, symmetry, emotion, personal taste? Kant's answer was surprisingly deep. Beauty is not in the object alone, nor in the observer alone. Beauty arises through a harmony of the mind. When you encounter something beautiful, a sunset, a painting, a melody, a leaf, a face, your mind experiences a moment of effortless unity. Imagination plays freely, bringing images and associations to life. Understanding is engaged, but not in a rigid, logical way. The mind moves easily, as though the world and consciousness were briefly aligned. Beauty is not a property of things. It is an experience where the mind feels clear, open, and balanced. Kant believed that beauty gives us a sense of joy that is peaceful, a feeling of meaning that is quiet, a moment where the world seems perfectly fitting. Beauty is the world whispering to the mind, and the mind whispering back, I understand. Chapter 3. Disinterested pleasure. One of Kant's most important insights is the idea of disinterested pleasure. When we find something beautiful, the pleasure we feel is not tied to desire, possession, or use. If you admire a flower, you do not want to eat it. If you admire a mountain, you do not want to own it. If you admire a painting, you do not need it to benefit you. Beauty gives pleasure, but a peculiar kind of pleasure, pleasure without wanting. This is why Kant calls it disinterested. You enjoy the object without needing it. You appreciate it without using it. You value it without expecting anything in return. Beauty frees you from the demands of desire. It allows you to enjoy the world without trying to take anything from it. This disinterested pleasure is one of the most peaceful forms of joy that humans can experience. It is joy without possession, happiness without appetite, delight without dependence. Beauty is a gift that asks for nothing. Chapter 4. Universal Aesthetics. Kant made a surprising claim. When we call something beautiful, we speak as if everyone should agree. If you say, this sunset is beautiful, you are not merely saying, I personally like this sunset. You are saying, this is beautiful for anyone. Even though beauty is subjective in experience, it carries a claim to universality. Why? Because the harmony of imagination and understanding is built into all human beings. When you say something is beautiful, you are inviting others to share in an experience that feels inherently human. This does not mean everyone will agree, but the claim is universal. Beauty creates a bridge between individuals. It calls us to a common experience. It suggests that behind our differences, we share something fundamental. This is why beauty unites cultures, transcends languages, moves both children and adults, appears in nature and art alike. Beauty speaks to the shared structure of the human mind. It is a universal language, not because we are forced to speak it, but because we naturally understand it. Chapter 5. Beauty and Morality Connected. For Kant, beauty is not merely decoration. It has a profound connection to morality. How? Because beauty trains the mind to appreciate harmony, order, and universality. Beauty teaches us to take pleasure in something without wanting to control it. It teaches us to see value without possession. It teaches us to experience joy without desire. This prepares the mind for moral life. Moral action requires rising above personal desire, respecting others as ends, appreciating dignity without possession, choosing principles over impulse, valuing universality, loving what is right simply because it is right. Beauty is a quiet echo of morality. It gives us pleasure without self-interest, just as morality demands goodness without selfish motives. Kant believed that a person who can appreciate beauty is better prepared to appreciate moral law. Both beauty and morality create a sense of harmony. Beauty creates harmony between imagination and understanding. Morality creates harmony between inclination and duty. And both experiences lift the human spirit beyond mere nature. Beauty shows us a world that feels meaningful without being useful. Morality shows us a world that becomes meaningful through freedom and dignity. In beauty, we glimpse the possibility of a world guided by the best in us. In morality, we build that world. Beauty softens the heart. Morality strengthens the will. Together, they reveal the dignity and depth of the human being. Part 19, The Sublime. Chapter 1, Awe Beyond Understanding. If beauty, for Kant, is harmony and gentle pleasure, the sublime is something entirely different. The sublime is what we feel when we confront something so vast, so powerful, so overwhelming that the mind cannot fully comprehend it. It is not peaceful. It is not soft. It is not delicate. The sublime shakes us. It stretches the mind past its comfort, past its limits, into a space that feels both terrifying and exhilarating. Standing at the edge of a vast ocean, at the foot of a towering mountain, beneath a sky full of endless stars, we feel something that cannot be reduced to simple enjoyment. We feel awe beyond understanding. Kant believed the sublime reveals something profound about human nature, that the mind can recognize its own limits, and yet feel lifted beyond those limits. The sublime is not about the object. It is about the response the object awakens within us. A response that says, I am small but not insignificant. The world is vast, but my mind can stretch toward its vastness. The sublime shows us the edges of our capacity and hints at something beyond those edges. Chapter 2, Fear Without Danger. Unlike beauty, which brings calm pleasure, the sublime carries a strange mixture of fear and safety. Kant describes it as a pleasure that arises only within fear, a fear without real danger. Imagine standing before a thunderstorm. The sky cracks open with lightning. The earth trembles with sound. Winds roar through the landscape. Part of you feels afraid, yet you're not in direct danger. This distance allows you to feel the power of nature without being destroyed by it. The feeling is unsettling, but also deeply alive. Why? Because the sublime reminds us that nature is overwhelmingly powerful, and yet we can still experience it through consciousness. We can contemplate what could crush us. We can think about what exceeds us. We can witness what is far greater than us. And in that distance between fear and danger, between threat and safety, the sublime awakens a unique emotion, a trembling realization of human vulnerability and human strength at the same time. The sublime is not comfort. It is confrontation, a confrontation that enlarges the soul. Chapter 3, Infinity in the Mind. The sublime does not simply involve large objects. It involves the mind encountering the infinite. A night sky filled with billions of stars is not just physically vast. It points to an endlessness the mind cannot truly grasp. A mountain range stretching to the horizon is not just tall. It gestures toward boundlessness. The mind tries to comprehend it, but it cannot fit infinity within the limits of human cognition. And yet, the mind still reaches for it. This reaching is the key to Kant's understanding of the sublime. When the senses fail, when imagination collapses, when understanding cannot measure or contain, reason steps forward. Reason alone can form the idea of infinity, a space without end, a time without beginning, a power without limit. The sublime happens when the imagination fails, but reason rises. In that rise, we experience something remarkable. The mind recognizes that the infinite cannot be contained in perception, but can be conceived in thought. We cannot see infinity. We cannot touch it. We cannot picture it, but we can think it. And that capacity, the ability to hold the idea of the infinite, reveals a dignity within the human mind. The sublime is the mind witnessing its own immensity. Chapter 4, Nature's Power. Nature plays a central role in Kant's idea of the sublime, but not peaceful nature, not gentle breezes or quiet gardens. The sublime emerges from nature in its most overwhelming forms. Storms, oceans, volcanoes, deserts, glaciers, mountain ridges, endless forests, deep night skies. In these encounters, we become aware of two truths at once. 1. Nature can destroy us. Its power far exceeds our physical strength. A wave can sweep us away. Lightning can strike. Earthquakes can shatter cities. 2. Nature cannot destroy our dignity. Even when physically small, the human mind can contemplate what surpasses it. This paradox fascinates Kant. The sublime is not about nature overpowering us. It is about the realization that our rational nature cannot be overpowered. Nature is mighty. The human mind is free. Nature overwhelms the senses. Reason stands firm. Nature dwarfs the body. The moral will remain infinite. This is why the sublime inspires not despair, but elevation. It reveals that while nature is stronger, we belong to a realm that nature cannot touch, the realm of freedom, reason, and inner law. The sublime is nature's power meeting the human spirit's depth. Chapter 5. The Sublime and the Self. For Kant, the sublime does something extraordinary. It reveals the two sides of the human being. 1. The empirical self. This is the self that feels small when confronted with vastness. The self that trembles before storms, fears destruction, and senses its own fragility. 2. The noumenal self. This is the self that recognizes its own independence from nature. The noumenal self is the source of freedom, dignity, moral will, rational thought, the idea of infinity. The sublime awakens both selves. The body feels fear. The mind feels exaltation. The senses collapse before the overwhelming presence of the world, but reason stands firm and even grows stronger. This experience teaches something profound. We are not merely creatures of nature. We are beings capable of rising above nature through reason and moral consciousness. The sublime reveals that the human being has a dual nature, physically small, spiritually vast. When we encounter the sublime, we momentarily step outside the limits of perception and feel connected to something greater, something infinite, something moral, something free. This connection is not knowledge. It is not emotion alone. It is a recognition of the depth within ourselves. This is why Kant believed the sublime is essential to human life. Beauty softens the heart. Morality disciplines the will. But the sublime reminds the soul of its power. It shows that even in the face of overwhelming nature, the human spirit does not break. It expands. Part 20. Reason and Emotion. Chapter 1. Does Kant ignore feelings? Kant is often viewed as a philosopher who dismisses emotion, as if he believed that feelings were distractions, weaknesses, or obstacles to moral life. This is a misunderstanding. Kant did not deny emotion. He simply refused to ground morality in emotion. Why? Because emotions change. They rise and fall. They conflict with each other. They vary from person to person. They can cloud judgment. They can be manipulated. If morality depended on feeling, then morality itself would be unstable. Kant saw feelings as part of human nature, a vital part, but not the foundation of ethics. He believed that emotions belong to the phenomenal self, the self shaped by nature, by impulses by the world around us. And morality belongs to the noumenal self, the self that chooses, reflects, and acts from universal principles. So Kant did not ignore feelings. He placed them in their proper place. Important for human experience. Dangerous as moral guides. Valuable as companions to reason. Unreliable as foundations of duty. Kant didn't want people to suppress emotion. He wanted them to govern emotion with clarity, principle, and dignity. Chapter 2. Respect as a moral feeling. Even though Kant insists morality must be based on reason, he identifies one feeling that plays a unique role. Respect. Respect is not an emotion we choose. It is an emotion awakened in us by the awareness of moral law. When you confront the moral law, not as a rule forced on you, but as a law your rational nature gives you, you feel something like awe, humility, reverence, clarity, seriousness. This feeling is respect. Respect is not sentimental. It is not tender. It is not emotional in the usual sense. Respect is the feeling that arises when the will recognizes something higher than desire. Kant believed that this emotion is unique because it is awakened by reason, not impulse. It strengthens duty. It gives moral law emotional presence. It humbles selfishness. It uplifts the rational self. Respect is the only emotion that does not distort morality. It supports it. It does not drown out reason. It flows from reason. This is why Kant often says, respect is the moral feeling. It is the bridge between pure rational duty and the emotional life of the human being. Chapter 3. Emotions versus Principles. Kant knew that humans face a constant tension between emotion and principle. Emotions tell us, this feels good, this hurts, I am angry, I am afraid, I want this now. Principles tell us, this is right, this respects others, this can be universalized, this honors dignity. Emotions pull inward, principles reach outward. Emotions focus on the moment, principles focus on the whole. Emotions respond to desire, principles respond to duty. Kant does not say emotions are bad. He simply says emotions cannot decide moral questions. If anger guides your action, you may harm others unjustly. If fear guides your action, you may abandon duty. If desire guides your action, you may choose selfishly. If sadness guides your action, you may withdraw from what must be done. Principle gives direction. Emotion gives energy. Emotion without principle is chaos. Principle without emotion is cold. Moral maturity requires bringing the two into harmony, not suppressing emotion, but guiding it. The moral will is like the helm of a ship. It must steer the vessel whether the waters are calm or stormy. Emotions are the waves. Principles are the compass. And the will is the captain. Chapter 4. Emotional Strength. Kant believed a strong person is not someone who feels nothing. A strong person is someone who feels deeply, understands their emotions, does not let impulses control them, remains honest about their inner life, chooses duty even when emotions resist, uses emotion without being used by emotion. This is true emotional strength. To feel compassion and choose the morally right action, that is strength. To feel anger and restrain yourself, that is strength. To feel fear and act from principle, that is strength. To feel desire yet follow duty, that is strength. Kant understood that emotions can make moral life more difficult, but also more meaningful. A person who chooses kindness, even when irritated, shows more moral character than one who is kind only when calm. A person who keeps a promise despite feeling restless or bored shows more integrity than one who does the right thing only when motivated. Emotional strength is not denying feelings. It is integrating them into a life guided by reason and duty. Emotion becomes fuel, not chains. Chapter 5. Calm Self-Control. Kant believed that the ideal moral life is marked by something simple, quiet, and steady. Calm self-control. This is not coldness. This is not emotional numbness. This is not detachment from humanity. Calm self-control is the state in which the will is stable even when the world is not. It means you acknowledge emotion. You understand it. You respect its reality. You refuse to be ruled by it. Calm self-control creates an inner space between feeling and action. In that space, reflection becomes possible. Reason has time to speak. Duty has time to guide. Dignity has time to emerge. This calmness is a form of freedom. Freedom from being pushed around by every momentary impulse. It is a clarity that allows the self to remain steady in a changing world. Kant believed that such calmness is not natural but cultivated. Through reflection, through discipline, through moral practice, through understanding, through willingness to grow. When calm self-control matures, the person does not suppress emotion. They ride its waves without sinking beneath them. They do not eliminate feeling. They place feeling in harmony with principle. This calmness is the quiet crown of moral life. It reflects a soul that has learned to balance emotion and reason, impulse and duty, humanity and dignity. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of it. Part 21. Kant on Humanity. Chapter 1. Human Dignity. Few concepts in Kant's philosophy are as powerful, as luminous, or as foundational as human dignity. For Kant, dignity is not something earned, not something granted, not something achieved by talent, wealth, or virtue. Dignity is inherent. Every human being, regardless of circumstance, status, intelligence, or power, possesses an intrinsic worth that cannot be measured, traded, or diminished. Why? Because every human being is capable of moral action. Every human can understand duty, reflect on principles, and choose freely from reason. This capacity makes human life different from everything else in nature. Nature has beauty. Nature has power. Nature has complexity. But nature does not have dignity. Dignity belongs to rational beings, to those who can rise above desire, govern themselves through moral law, and treat others not as tools but as equals. Dignity is not a social idea. It is a metaphysical reality. It is the inner worth that comes from being a creature capable of freedom. And this dignity, Kant insists, must never be violated, not by others and not by ourselves. For to violate dignity is to violate the essence of what it means to be human. Chapter 2. Rational Beings. Kant believed that rationality is the defining feature of humanity. But this rationality is not cold logic, not mathematical calculation, not mere intelligence. Rationality, in Kant's sense, means the ability to form universal principles, the ability to reflect on one's actions, the ability to choose duty over desire, the ability to recognize the moral law, the ability to see others as ends. This capacity makes each human being a member of a moral community. Rational beings are not governed only by instinct. We can step back from impulse and ask ourselves, should I do this? Will this be right? Could everyone act this way? Does this respect the dignity of others? This reflective capacity is what makes morality possible. Even when we fail to live up to our principles, the fact that we can reflect and choose reveals the dignity of the rational will. Kant believed that rational beings belong to two worlds. One, the world of nature, where we eat, sleep, desire, suffer, and age like all animals. Two, the world of freedom, where we choose, decide, reflect, and act morally. The presence of reason anchors us in this second world, the moral world. It is reason that gives humanity its profound and universal value. Chapter 3. Universal worth. Because all rational beings share the same moral capacity, Kant believed that all people possess universal worth. This worth does not change with circumstances. The sick have as much dignity as the healthy. The poor have as much dignity as the rich. The uneducated have as much dignity as the learned. The powerless have as much dignity as the influential. Human worth is not comparative. It is not marketable. It is not earned by performance. It is universal because it arises from a universal capacity, the capacity for moral law. This universal worth creates universal obligations. We must treat others not as objects, not as tools, not as means, not as obstacles, not as possessions, but as beings who share the same inner dignity we do. This is why Kant rejects manipulation, coercion, exploitation, humiliation, discrimination, dehumanization. To harm another's dignity is to harm the moral law itself. In a universe filled with stars, storms, and vastness, it is the human will that carries incomparable worth. Not because we are powerful, but because we are free. Not because we are strong, but because we are moral. This worth is universal, unconditional, unbreakable. Chapter 4. Community and Respect. Though Kant often speaks of the solitary moral will, he believed deeply in the moral community of humanity. Human beings, he said, are not isolated islands. We are members of a kingdom of ends, a community of rational beings who relate to one another with respect and dignity. This kingdom is not a place on earth. It is an ideal, a moral world that exists whenever people treat each other as ends. In this moral community, no one is used, no one is degraded, no one is treated as a tool, no one is above moral law, no one is below it. Everyone is equal in dignity. Respect is the binding force of this moral world. Respect means something very specific for Kant. Recognizing another person's autonomy, acknowledging their moral agency, treating them as capable of freedom, seeing them as a law-giving being, honoring their rational nature. Respect is not admiration. Respect is not affection. Respect is not approval. Respect is the recognition of the moral law in others. It is the attitude that says, "You are a rational being, and your dignity is as real as mine." Community, for Kant, is not built on shared emotions, but on shared moral nature. It is a community anchored in the principle of equality, the equality of all rational beings. Chapter 5. Why Humans Are Ends. At the center of Kant's ethics is one of the most famous statements in the history of philosophy. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end, and never merely as a means. What does this mean? It means humans cannot be used as instruments for someone else's goals. Humans cannot be treated as objects of manipulation. Humans cannot be exploited for profit, pleasure, or convenience. Humans must be respected as self-governing beings. To treat someone as a means is to reduce them to a tool. To treat someone as an end is to recognize their dignity and autonomy. Kant believed that the moral law comes from the rational will, and therefore every rational being is a giver of moral law. This is why humans must be treated as ends, because they are free, because they are rational, because they give themselves moral law, because their dignity is intrinsic, because they belong to the moral universe as equals. This idea reshaped the modern world. It is the foundation of human rights, human equality, and the belief in universal moral worth. Kant reminded us that behind every face is a self capable of duty, freedom, and dignity. And because of this, every human being must be treated as an end in themselves, never merely a means. Even when we struggle to fully live this out, the principle remains the North Star of moral life. Part 22, Law and Society. Chapter 1, Kant's Political Theory. Kant's political philosophy grows directly from his moral philosophy. Just as morality begins with autonomy, politics begins with freedom. Kant believed that society is not built merely for comfort, security, or efficiency, but for the protection of the moral person, the rational being capable of law and duty. A political system, therefore, must respect each human as free, equal, rational, and an end in themselves. Politics is not about power. It is about creating the conditions under which individuals can exercise their freedom without violating the freedom of others. Kant believed that the purpose of society is not to make people happy, because the state cannot define happiness for everyone, but to ensure justice so each person may pursue happiness according to their own ideals. His political thought has one central goal: to create a rightful condition where the freedom of each can coexist with the freedom of all under universal laws. This rightful condition is the heart of Kant's political theory. It is the framework that turns individuals into citizens and society into a moral community. Chapter 2, Rights and Duties. In Kant's philosophy, rights and duties always mirror each other. They arise from the same moral core. A right is not permission. A right is not a privilege. A right is a moral principle that protects human freedom. For Kant, every right corresponds to a duty. If you have a right to liberty, others have a duty not to dominate you. If you have a right to property, others have a duty to respect your ownership. If you have a right to speak freely, others have a duty not to silence you unjustly. If you have a right to life, others have a duty not to harm you. Rights and duties are two sides of the same coin. Rights express the individual's freedom. Duties express the respect for everyone else's freedom. This balance protects against tyranny, exploitation, coercion, arbitrary rule, and unjust authority. Kant believed that a society without rights is a society where freedom is impossible. But a society without duties is a society where selfishness destroys freedom. Rights without duties lead to chaos. Duties without rights lead to oppression. A just society must protect both. Chapter 3. Freedom and Law. For many people, freedom seems to mean doing whatever I want. Not for Kant. Kant believed that true freedom requires law, not arbitrary orders, but universal, rational laws that apply equally to all. Because without law, one person's freedom inevitably collides with another's. If your freedom allows you to steal, you destroy someone else's freedom to own property. If your freedom allows you to threaten others, you destroy their freedom to live in safety. If your freedom allows you to ignore responsibility, you undermine the conditions that make freedom possible for everyone. So Kant offered a definition of political freedom. Freedom is the ability to obey laws that one has given to oneself as a member of a rational community. Law does not limit freedom. Law creates freedom. When a society lives under fair, universal laws, each person knows what they may do, what they must not do, and what they can expect from others. Law provides stability. Stability provides trust. Trust provides freedom. Without law, everyone becomes a threat. With just law, everyone becomes a citizen. Freedom and law are not enemies. They are partners. Chapter 4. The Social Contract. Kant was influenced by earlier social contract theorists, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, but he transformed the idea in a uniquely moral way. The social contract for Kant is not a literal agreement signed at some moment in history. It is an idea of reason that guides how we judge political legitimacy. A government is legitimate only if its laws could be accepted by all rational beings as if they had consented to them. This means no secret privileges, no class-based laws, no special categories of citizens, no domination, no laws justified by force. A law is legitimate only if it could be willed as a universal principle by all members of society. The social contract is not about obedience, it is about autonomy. Individuals do not give up their freedom when they enter society. They transform their private freedom into public freedom. The freedom to live under laws that express the collective will of rational citizens. Kant believed that a proper social contract creates a political community where no one is above the law and no one is beneath its protection. This is the foundation of a just and stable society. Chapter 5. Just Society. For Kant, a just society is not the same as a happy society. Happiness is personal. Justice is universal. A just society is one where the law is impartial, rights are protected, duties are enforced, freedom is equal, dignity is honored, coercion is minimized, and citizens are treated as ends in themselves. A society is just when its institutions reflect the moral nature of human beings. This means no one may be used as a tool by the government or by other citizens. No one may be ruled by arbitrary power or by the whims of rulers. No one may be excluded from equal protection under the law. No one may be denied their basic rights to freedom and self-governance. A just society respects the moral law inside each person. It does not require citizens to be saints or sages. It requires them to act as members of a moral community. And it requires institutions that reflect the principle that all people are equal in dignity and rights. A just society is not perfect. It is principled. It strives for fairness, protects the weak, restrains the powerful, and creates the conditions under which freedom flourishes. Kant believed that building such a society is one of humanity's greatest duties. A just society is a moral achievement, a reflection of the rational will made visible in the world. It is the place where individual dignity meets collective responsibility, where freedom becomes law, where humanity becomes political, and where the moral person finds a home. Part 23. Kant on War and Peace. Chapter 1. Why War Happens. Kant was not naive about human history. He lived through a Europe shaken by conflict, wars of kings, wars of nations, wars of ambition. And he knew that war is not an accident. not a mistake, not merely a failure of diplomacy. War, he believed, comes from human nature and from the conditions of political life. Nations, like individuals, are driven by fear, competition, pride, insecurity, and the desire for advantage. But unlike individuals, nations exist in a world without a common authority. Between countries, there is no judge, no universal police, no central law that binds everyone equally. This condition, the state of nature between nations, creates instability. Even if nations want peace, they cannot fully trust one another. Fear leads to armament. Armament leads to tension. Tension leads to conflict. War becomes a cycle fueled not merely by aggression, but by insecurity. Kant believed that war happens not because humans love bloodshed, but because political structures force nations into rivalry. We live in a world where states must either defend themselves, expand to survive, or risk destruction. War, therefore, is the predictable result of a world without shared law. But Kant also believed that this tragic pattern can be transformed, not through power, not through conquest, but through reason. Chapter 2. Conditions for Peace. Kant's philosophy of peace is not sentimental or emotional. It is structural, rational, and deeply grounded in the moral nature of humanity. Peace, he believed, is not merely the absence of war. It is the presence of just conditions that make war unnecessary. For peace to emerge, nations must renounce secret treaties. Secrecy breeds suspicion. Suspicion breeds conflict. Open agreements create trust. Maintain standing armies only under strict limits. Armies provoke fear. Fear provokes arms races. Peace cannot grow in a climate of preparation for war. Respect national sovereignty. Nations must not be treated as property that rulers can trade, buy, or inherit. Citizens, not monarchs, own their state. Avoid interference in other states' internal affairs. Invading, overthrowing, or manipulating other nations creates cycles of revenge. Follow universal moral laws. Just as individuals must act ethically, nations must act from principles that could be universalized. For Kant, peace is possible only when nations relate to one another as moral agents, not as predators, not as rivals, but as equals. Peace must be built from principles that apply to all. Chapter 3. Republics and Freedom. One of Kant's most important political insights is his belief that republics, governments based on law, representation, and individual rights, are more peaceful than autocracies. Why? Because when citizens participate in decision-making, they're cautious about war. They feel the cost of conflict. They do not want to sacrifice their own lives. They consider justice more carefully. Autocratic rulers, however, can start wars without personal risk. They use armies as tools, citizens as pawns, and victory as glory. Kant believed that a republic, founded on freedom and law, creates a moral foundation for peace. He didn't mean republic in the narrow modern sense, but in a philosophical sense. A state governed by law, not by whim. A system where all citizens are equal under that law. A government accountable to the people. Where freedom prevails domestically, aggression decreases internationally. A free society respects its own citizens, and therefore is more likely to respect the citizens of other nations. Freedom at home creates peace abroad. Chapter 4. Perpetual Peace. Kant's most famous political essay, Perpetual Peace, is not a dream of perfect harmony, but a blueprint for a just world. He believed that humanity could gradually build a stable peace through institutions grounded in reason. 3 levels of peace must be established. 1. Peace within states. A just constitution based on freedom, equality, and law. Citizens must be protected from tyranny. 2. Peace between states. Nations must form a federation, a league of states committed to resolving conflict without war. This federation is not a world government, but a pact of mutual respect and shared law. 3. Peace across humanity. People must be treated as citizens of the world, with rights that extend beyond borders. Hospitality, migration, and trade must be governed by universal principles. Perpetual peace is not utopian. It is a logical outcome of moral and political progress. As republics spread, as citizens gain rights, as nations act from law rather than fear, war becomes less necessary. Humanity grows toward peace as it grows toward maturity. Kant believed that peace is not automatic. It requires work, moral work, political work, and structural work. But it is achievable because reason points toward it. Chapter 5. A Future of Justice. Kant saw human history as a slow, often painful struggle toward moral improvement. Not perfection, but improvement. He believed that the human species is capable of learning from suffering and conflict. War teaches nations the cost of ambition. Oppression teaches citizens the value of liberty. Chaos teaches governments the need for law. And through these lessons, humanity inches forward. Kant imagined a future where states interact not as enemies, but as members of a shared moral community. A future where the rights of individuals are protected, the sovereignty of nations is respected, the laws of war are replaced by laws of peace. Justice and freedom shape international relations. This future is not guaranteed. It is not destiny. It is a task grounded in reason, carried by moral will, and expressed through political institutions that reflect the dignity of humanity. Kant believed that the human race has a moral purpose, to build a world where freedom and justice stand above violence and domination. War reveals our failures. Peace reveals our potential. In striving for peace, humanity moves closer to the moral law within, a law that, if followed, could transform the world into a home of justice, freedom, and enduring dignity. Part 24. The Enlightenment Spirit. Chapter 1. What it means to mature. For Kant, the Enlightenment was not merely a historical period. It was a transformation of the human soul, a shift from dependence to autonomy, from passive acceptance to active understanding. He described enlightenment with one famous phrase: Sapiro, dare to know. But this daring is not reckless. It is moral. It is spiritual. It is an invitation for humanity to mature. What does it mean to mature? For Kant, maturity means leaving behind a childhood of the mind, a state where people depend on others to tell them what is true, what is right, and how to live. He believed that many people remain in this childhood not because they lack ability, but because they lack courage. It is easier to obey than to think. It is easier to follow than to stand on one's own reason. It is easier to remain passive than to take responsibility for one's beliefs. Maturity, in Kant's sense, is the movement from borrowed convictions to self-given principles. To mature is to awaken the inner moral and rational powers that every human being possesses. This maturity is the essence of the Enlightenment Spirit. Chapter 2. Thinking for Yourself. Kant believed that the truly enlightened person is someone who dares to think independently. Thinking for yourself does not mean rejecting all authority or resisting all tradition. It means asking, is this true? Is this reasonable? Can this be universalized? Does this respect human dignity? Does this align with moral law? Thinking for yourself means taking your own mind seriously. It means refusing to let superstition, manipulation, propaganda, blind custom, or social pressure replace your own judgment. Kant does not ask us to rebel against society. He asks us to rise above intellectual laziness. Most people, he said, remain stuck in mental immaturity because they rely on others. Priests to think spiritually for them, doctors to think medically for them, rulers to think politically for them, experts to think morally for them. But true enlightenment requires choosing reason over dependency. Thinking for yourself is the first act of intellectual freedom. Chapter 3. The Courage to Reason. Kant understood that thinking for yourself is not always easy. Reason requires courage, the courage to doubt, the courage to question, the courage to change, the courage to face uncertainty. Many people avoid reason because truth can be uncomfortable. To use reason honestly may force us to challenge our own beliefs, our inherited values, our social norms, our emotional attachments. Reason can expose contradictions in the stories we tell ourselves. It can reveal flaws in the systems we trust. This is why Kant said that courage is necessary. Reason asks us to step into the light, to see things clearly even when clarity hurts. But this courage does not isolate us. It connects us to every other rational being. For Kant, to reason is to participate in a shared human world of truth, dialogue, and universal principles. The courage to reason is the courage to be free. Because when we think clearly, we do not follow impulses. We follow principles. Reason becomes the path from confusion to clarity, from obedience to autonomy. Chapter 4. Public Use of Reason. One of Kant's most revolutionary ideas is the difference between private and public use of reason. The private use of reason occurs when you act as part of an institution, a citizen, a soldier, a worker, a member of an organization. In these roles, you must sometimes obey instruction for the sake of order and function. But the public use of reason is something entirely different. The public use of reason is your ability to speak as a rational human being in the shared space of humanity. It is the freedom to express ideas, to discuss, to debate, to critique, to write, to teach, to question. Kant believed that the public use of reason must always be free, because without this freedom, society cannot progress. Governments may require obedience in action, but they must never silence thought. Religions may require discipline in practice, but they must never forbid reflection. Institutions may demand conformity in function, but they must never block inquiry. When the public use of reason thrives, sciences advance, moral insight deepens, societies reform, injustices are exposed, humanity matures. Freedom of thought is not just a political right, it is the lifeblood of human progress. Chapter 5. Humanity's Progress. Kant believed that humanity is not stuck. History, though slow and filled with conflict, moves towards something greater. Not toward perfection, but toward moral progress. He saw signs of this progress wherever. People gain the courage to think. Societies move toward justice. Governments adopt laws based on freedom. Citizens demand dignity. Education spreads. Rights expand. Cruelty declines. Reason becomes public. This progress is never smooth. It is never guaranteed. It does not eliminate suffering. It does not create utopia, but it reveals a direction. Humanity slowly learning to live according to reason and dignity. The Enlightenment Spirit is not about arrogance. It is not about believing we know everything. It is about recognizing that reason can guide us toward a more just world. Progress happens when individuals dare to think, when they awaken their inner maturity and act as members of a rational moral community. Each generation inherits the struggles and insights of the last, and through this inheritance, humanity slowly moves forward. Kant believed that the Enlightenment was the beginning of humanity's adulthood, a turning point where the human mind realized its own power. A power not of domination, but of clarity. A power not of violence, but of autonomy. A power not of pride, but of responsibility. The Enlightenment Spirit is the spirit of freedom. Freedom rooted in reason, dignity, and the unending human quest to understand and to do what is right. Part 25. Kant's Influence. Chapter 1. How he transformed philosophy. Few thinkers reshaped the human mind as profoundly as Immanuel Kant. Before him, philosophy had divided into two camps. Rationalists, who believed reason alone could reach truth. Empiricists, who believed experience was the sole source of knowledge. Kant studied both, respected both, and yet found them incomplete. Then he offered something revolutionary. The mind is not a passive mirror. The mind is an active participant in shaping experience. This insight changed everything. It meant knowledge is not a copy of the world. Knowledge is a relationship between the world and the mind. Reason has limits, and within those limits, it has structure. We never access reality in itself, only reality as appears. Human understanding is both powerful and constrained. Kant did not destroy philosophy. He rebuilt its foundation. His critiques reorganized metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, political theory, aesthetics, and even the nature of rational thought. After Kant, philosophers could no longer simply describe reality. They had to ask how the mind constructs the very possibility of experience. He transformed philosophy from a search for external truths into a study of the conditions that make truth possible. The shock of Kant's ideas echoed across centuries, reshaping every major movement that followed. Chapter 2: Modern Ethics. Kant's moral philosophy changed ethics forever. Before him, ethics often depended on virtue, emotion, consequences, or divine command. Kant shifted the foundation to something universal: the rational will, duty, autonomy, the moral law within. He taught that morality is not about what feels good, what society approves, or what benefits us. Morality is about principle. Actions have moral worth only when done from duty, from a principle that can be followed by everyone. This introduced the Categorical Imperative, a test for morality grounded in universality and dignity. Modern ethical theories, from human rights to deontological ethics, are deeply shaped by Kant's thinking. His ideas form the basis of contemporary discussions of justice, debates about autonomy in medicine, the moral status of persons, fairness in political systems, the idea that every human life has inherent worth. Kant helped create the moral vocabulary that the modern world still uses. Even when philosophers disagree with him, they speak within the framework he established. Kant didn't just influence modern ethics, he created it. Chapter 3: Phenomenology. Phenomenology, the philosophical study of experience, begins with Kant's insight that the mind shapes the world of appearances. Thinkers like Husserl and Heidegger took Kant's idea and deepened it. Consciousness is not passive. Meaning is not out there waiting to be discovered. Experience is structured by intentionality, by the ways the mind approaches the world. Kant provided the seeds for this entire tradition. Phenomenologists expanded his claim that space and time are not objects, but forms of the mind. Perception is not a window, but an active interpretation. The self is not simply given, but constructed in experience. Without Kant, phenomenology would not exist. He offered the first framework showing that human experience has internal architecture, patterns, categories, structures that shape the world we perceive. Phenomenology took that insight and transformed it into a vast study of perception, meaning, and lived awareness. Kant was the doorway through which 20th century thought entered its exploration of consciousness. Chapter 4: Existentialism. Though existentialists often rebelled against Kant, they owed him more than they admitted. Kant emphasized freedom, moral responsibility, the inner law, the self as something created through choice. Existentialists like Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Sartre, and Camus took these themes and gave them emotional intensity. Freedom becomes radical freedom. Choice becomes identity. Responsibility becomes burden. Authenticity becomes a moral struggle. Kant insisted that humans are free not because the world allows it, but because morality requires it. Existentialism took this and asked, what does it mean to live as a free being in an unstructured world? How does one choose meaning when reason cannot decide? What does authenticity require when tradition collapses? Kant set the stage for the existential confrontation between reason and the absurd, between duty and despair, between freedom and isolation. Even Nietzsche, one of Kant's fiercest critics, built his entire project out of Kant's central question. What is the self when stripped of illusions? Existentialism is the emotional echo of Kant's rational revolution. Chapter 5: Cognitive Science. Kant's influence reaches far beyond philosophy. He is one of the intellectual ancestors of modern cognitive science. His key insight: the mind actively structures experience. Today, neuroscience and psychology confirm what Kant argued centuries earlier. Perception is constructed, not merely received. The brain uses categories and models to interpret sensory data. Time and space are cognitive frameworks. Knowledge depends on mental structures. The self is a system, not a static entity. Cognitive science echoes Kant's view that the mind is not a camera, but a processor, a system that filters, organizes, and assembles experience. Artificial intelligence research also mirrors Kant. AI requires built-in categories to interpret input. Perception must be pre-structured by the system. Meaning comes from algorithms, not raw data alone. Kant predicted much of what modern science now studies. He gave the first deep theory of how mind and world interact through a structured, active process. In this way, Kant stands not only at the birth of modern philosophy, but also at the foundation of the scientific study of the mind. Part 26, Kant versus Other Philosophers. Chapter 1, Kant versus Hume. David Hume was the spark that ignited Kant's revolution. Kant famously said Hume awoke me from my dogmatic slumber. Why? Because Hume dared to claim that reason is weak, that cause and effect is a habit, and that the mind does not know necessity, only expectation. Hume believed the mind receives impressions. Patterns become habits. Habits become beliefs. Beliefs become illusions of necessity. To Hume, causation is psychological, not rational. We cannot know the sun will rise tomorrow. We only expect it because we've seen it happen many times. Kant took this skepticism seriously. But instead of discarding reason, he asked the deeper question, what makes experience possible in the first place? His answer reshaped philosophy. Causation is not learned from experience. Causation is built into the mind. It is a category through which experience is structured. Where Hume saw habit, Kant saw necessity. Where Hume saw passivity, Kant saw mental structure. Where Hume saw the collapse of metaphysics, Kant saw the rebirth of reason. Hume dismantled dogma. Kant built a new foundation on top of that rubble. Their difference is simple. Hume, the world shapes the mind. Kant, the mind shapes the world of experience. In this quiet tension, modern philosophy was born. Chapter 2, Kant versus Descartes. René Descartes believed that knowledge begins with certainty, with an indubitable truth. I think, therefore I am. From this one foundation, Descartes built a rationalist universe rooted in clarity, self-awareness, and God's perfection. Kant admired Descartes' rigor, but disagreed with his method. Descartes believed the self is immediately known. God guarantees reason's reliability. Clear ideas reflect the world. The mind can reach truth by pure thought. Kant overturned this with a quiet, steady hand. The self is not known. It is constructed by experience. Reason does not need God as a guarantor. Clear ideas may reflect the mind, not the world. Pure thought cannot reveal reality in itself. Descartes tried to climb from certainty to the external world. Kant said the climb is impossible. Instead, Kant redefined the problem. How does the mind organize the world we experience? He shifted philosophy from seeking metaphysical certainty to understanding mental conditions of experience. Descartes searched for an absolute foundation. Kant showed that foundations come not from metaphysics, but from the structure of cognition. In the end, Descartes placed the self before the world. Kant placed the world and self within the forms of human understanding. It was a shift as powerful as the Copernican revolution itself. Chapter 3, Kant versus Nietzsche. Kant and Nietzsche are opposites standing on the same battlefield. Both sought freedom. Both challenged tradition. Both confronted morality. But they moved in opposite directions. Kant's view of morality, grounded in reason, universal, rational, duty-based, stable, principled, respectful of human dignity. Nietzsche's view of morality, created by human drives, historically conditioned, psychological, expressive of power, fluid, artistic, beyond good and evil. Kant believed morality comes from the rational will, a universal law we discover within ourselves. Nietzsche believed morality comes from instincts, expressions of strength, weakness, resentment, or creativity. Kant saw dignity in universal principles. Nietzsche saw life in individual creation. Kant said, "Treat every person as an end." Nietzsche replied, "There are no universal ends, only creators and creations." Kant wanted morality strong enough to resist desire. Nietzsche wanted morality honest enough to reveal desire. Kant believed in autonomy, the moral self rising above impulse. Nietzsche believed in self-overcoming, the creative self rising above constraint. They stand as two poles of modern thought: duty versus expression, reason versus instinct, universal law versus individual will. Yet both share the same dream, that human beings can shape their own destiny. Chapter 4. Kant versus Aristotle. Aristotle's ethics is ancient, warm, practical. It is the ethics of human flourishing, where virtue is cultivated through habit, and the goal is eudaimonia, a good life lived with excellence. Kant's ethics is modern, stern, principled. It is the ethics of the rational will, where morality is rooted in universal law and the goal is duty. Aristotle believed, morality depends on character. Character depends on habit. Habit depends on upbringing. The good life is a matter of finding balance. Emotions should be trained, not suppressed. Kant believed, morality depends on intention. Intention depends on reason. Reason gives universal moral laws. The good life requires duty, not balance. Emotions are secondary to principle. Aristotle asked, "What kind of person should I become?" Kant asked, "What principle should guide my action?" For Aristotle, morality is a craft, an art of becoming wise. For Kant, morality is a law, an act of autonomous will. Aristotle's ethics is human-centered and flexible. Kant's ethics is universal and uncompromising. Aristotle sought harmony. Kant sought universality. Between them, the entire spectrum of ethical thought unfolds. Chapter 5. Kant versus Utilitarians. Utilitarian thinkers like Bentham and Mill argued that morality is simple. The right action is the one that maximizes happiness. Kant rejected this approach completely. His reasons are sharp and clear. 1. Happiness is subjective. What makes one person happy may harm another. It cannot be a stable measure of morality. 2. Consequences are unpredictable. We can control intention, but not outcomes. 3. Morality cannot depend on results, because results are governed by nature, not by the will. 4. People must never be used. Utilitarianism risks sacrificing individuals for the sake of majority happiness. Kant believed that utilitarianism, if taken literally, could justify injustice, manipulation, exploitation, oppression, or even cruelty, as long as they increased overall pleasure. He found this unacceptable. For Kant, morality is not about producing happiness. It is about respecting persons, their freedom, and their rational dignity. Utilitarianism measures actions by pleasure. Kant measures actions by principle. Utilitarians ask, what will happen? Kant asks, what does duty demand? Utilitarianism is consequentialist. Kant is deontological. Utilitarianism sees morality in numbers. Kant sees morality in the will. In the clash between them lies one of the greatest debates in all of ethics. Part 27. Kant's Legacy in Our Lives. Chapter 1. Why Kant Still Matters. More than 2 centuries have passed since Immanuel Kant walked the streets of Königsberg. Yet his ideas remain alive because they speak to something permanent in the human condition. Technology changes. Societies shift. Cultures transform. But the questions Kant asked are the same questions we ask today. What can I know? What should I do? What may I hope for? What makes me free? What does it mean to treat others morally? Kant matters because he gives us tools for clarity in a world full of confusion. He shows us how to think critically, how to resist manipulation, how to ground morality in reason, how to respect human dignity, how to create a just society, how to face uncertainty with integrity and hope. His vision is not outdated. It is foundational. Every time we rely on science instead of superstition, every time we insist that people be treated equally, every time we refuse to use someone as a tool, every time we value reason over impulse, we are living in Kant's world. Kant still matters because he teaches us how to be responsible for our own minds. Chapter 2. Autonomy today. Autonomy, the ability to give ourselves the law of our own actions, is one of Kant's greatest gifts to modern thought. In Kant's time, society was shaped by religion, monarchy, and tradition. Individuals rarely had the freedom to think and act independently. Today, autonomy lies at the heart of democracy, human rights, education, therapy, medicine, personal development. Whenever people insist on deciding for themselves, not from rebellion, but from thoughtful reflection, they embody Kantian autonomy. Autonomy today means thinking critically, questioning unhealthy systems, resisting peer pressure, forming your own principles, choosing actions because they are right, taking responsibility for your values. Autonomy does not mean doing whatever you want. It means acting from principles you can defend with reason. In a world filled with distractions, noise, and emotional manipulation, Kant's autonomy becomes a compass, one that protects our dignity and keeps us grounded in our moral freedom. Chapter 3. Human Rights. Modern human rights grew from Kant's simple insight. Every human being has inherent dignity and must be treated as an end in themselves. This idea became the moral foundation for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, modern constitutional law, anti-slavery movements, equality legislation, protections for minorities, medical consent, international justice. Kant's insistence that no person may be used as a mere tool reshaped the world. Before Kant, many societies believed that worth was tied to class, religion, gender, heritage, race, occupation. Kant broke this hierarchy. He declared that dignity belongs to every rational being, not because of what they achieve, but because of what they are. This Kantian insight silently guides thousands of ethical decisions every single day, respecting patients in hospitals, protecting the rights of the accused, resisting exploitation in workplaces, supporting the equality of women, defending disabled individuals, safeguarding the elderly, ensuring fair treatment for migrants. Kant's philosophy is the backbone of modern justice. Human rights are Kant's legacy written into law. Chapter 4. Modern Science. Kant's influence reaches far into science, not through experiments, but through the structure of the mind. His idea that the mind shapes experience anticipated modern discoveries in neuroscience. Perception is constructed. The brain interprets data. Time and space are cognitive models. Psychology. The self is not a fixed entity. Thought is structured. Cognition involves categories and patterns. Artificial intelligence. Machines require frameworks. Raw data must be organized. Algorithms structure experience just as categories do. Quantum physics. Even here, Kant echoes, we observe not the thing in itself, but the thing is measured through conditions of observation. Kant understood that humans do not see the world as it is. We see it through the lens of our mental faculties. This insight transformed scientific humility. It reminds us that our knowledge has limits. Our perception has boundaries. Our mind participates in constructing experience. Modern science does not merely confirm Kant. It extends him. We now understand that the human mind is not a passive receiver. It is an active creator of the world we experience. Kant's philosophy is not only about ethics, it is about cognition itself. Chapter 5. Moral Responsibility. Perhaps the most personal part of Kant's legacy is his insistence on moral responsibility. Kant believed that every person has the ability to choose their actions from reason rather than impulse. This means you are responsible for your choices. You are accountable for your principles. You cannot hide behind excuses. You cannot blame your desires. You cannot blame your emotions. You cannot blame the situation. Morality is not about being perfect. It is about being honest with yourself. Responsibility means knowing why you act, standing behind your intentions, honoring the dignity of others, resisting the temptation to use people or lie to them, doing the right thing even when it costs something. In a world full of distractions, pressures, and temptations, Kant's voice remains steady. Act as though your principles could become a universal law. This is not a burden. It is a path toward inner clarity, toward self-respect, toward a life grounded in integrity. Kant's legacy in our lives is the reminder that we are free, not because the world gives us freedom, but because our rational can guide our actions. We are moral beings in a world of shifting conditions. We carry within us the law of reason, the power of choice, and the dignity of autonomy. This is why Kant still matters, because he reminds us that the deepest strength comes from the moral self, from the ability to choose rightly, and from the quiet courage to act from principle in a world that often forgets principles. Part 28, The Inner Struggle. Chapter 1, Freedom versus Desire. For Kant, the human being lives in a quiet battlefield, a place where two forces constantly pull in opposite directions. One is desire, the natural impulses that come from our senses, our instincts, our habits, our emotions. Desire is not evil. It is part of our human nature, the phenomenal self shaped by the world. The other is freedom, the power of the rational will to choose principles that rise above impulse. Freedom does not mean doing whatever we feel like. It means acting according to laws we give ourselves from reason. And these two forces, desire and freedom, meet every day, in every choice, in every moment of decision. Desire says, this feels good now. Freedom says, this must be right for all. Desire says, choose comfort. Freedom says, choose dignity. Desire says, take the easy path. Freedom says, take the moral path. Kant believed that morality begins the moment we recognize this inner struggle. Because freedom is not the absence of desire. Freedom is the ability to rise above it. When we follow desire blindly, we are not free. We are driven. But when we choose duty even against temptation, we reveal the noumenal self, the free self, the moral self, the self that belongs not to nature, but to reason. The inner struggle is the birthplace of moral life. Chapter 2, The Law Within. Kant believed that each human being carries within them a silent source of guidance, a law that is not imposed from outside, but arises from the rational will itself. He called it the moral law. This law does not shout. It does not threaten. It does not reward. It simply states, act only according to principles you could will for everyone. This law is universal, impersonal, calm, and deeply intimate. It is the highest expression of human reason, the part of us that sees beyond personal gain, momentary pleasure, fear of consequences, pressures of society. The moral law does not ask, what do I want? It asks, what is right? It does not ask, what benefits me? It asks, what respects every rational being? When the moral law speaks, it awakens something rare inside us, a feeling Kant called respect, not a soft emotion, but a powerful recognition that we stand before something greater than inclination. The moral law within is the voice of the rational self, the reminder that we are capable of freedom, dignity, and universality. It is the compass that helps us walk through the fog of desire. And in the inner struggle, the moral law is the steady light that never dims. Chapter 3, The Temptation of Ease. Kant understood human nature with remarkable clarity. He knew that the greatest threat to moral life is rarely dramatic evil. It is the quiet temptation of ease. Ease whispers, do it later. No one will know. It doesn't matter this time. Why put in the effort? Take this simple path. Ease pulls us away from the difficult work of moral responsibility, because doing the right thing often requires honesty when it would be easier to lie, patience when anger feels justified, generosity when selfishness feels natural, discipline when laziness offers comfort, integrity when shortcuts tempt us. Ease is not a villain. It is simply the default mode of the phenomenal self, the self shaped by instinct and habit. Kant believed that moral failure rarely comes from intention to harm. It comes from not wanting to struggle, not wanting to think deeply, not wanting to choose the harder path. The temptation of ease is the temptation to let nature rule us instead of reason, to let impulse decide instead of principle, to live passively instead of autonomously. The inner struggle is not between good and evil, but between ease and effort, between what is comfortable and what is right. And Kant believed that choosing effort is the essence of moral strength. Chapter 4. Choosing the Good. To choose the good, for Kant, is not to follow a feeling. It is to commit to a principle. Choosing the good means acting from duty, from a universal law you give yourself as a rational being. It is not about reward. It is not about approval. It is not about reputation. It is not about consequences. It is about intention. Kant believed that every moral choice is an opportunity to rise from the phenomenal world to the noumenal one. When you choose the good, you affirm your freedom, your dignity, your rational nature, your membership in the moral community, your ability to be more than impulse. Choosing the good is not glamorous. It is often quiet, invisible, and difficult. It may mean telling the truth when it costs you, keeping a promise when you're tired, helping someone when no one will see, refusing to exploit someone even when you could, respecting others even when they disrespect you. These choices do not always feel heroic, but in Kantian ethics, they are heroic because they are victories of the will. To choose the good is to choose yourself, your true self, the rational self, the free self. Every act of duty strengthens the moral character and reveals the dignity that lies within. Chapter 5. Strength of Will. At the heart of Kant's philosophy is the idea that moral life requires strength. Not physical strength, not emotional dominance, not social power, but strength of will. This strength is the ability to resist temptation, to govern desire, to act from principle, to follow duty, to remain steady in difficulty, to honor the moral law even when no one is watching. Strength of will is a quiet power. It does not shout. It does not seek attention. It does not triumph visibly. It shows itself in small actions. The decision to be honest, the choice to be just, the discipline to be fair, the courage to respect others, the commitment to universal principles. Strength of will is the inner architecture that supports the moral self. Kant believed that every human being has this strength, not because it is easy, but because it is our nature as rational beings. The inner struggle does not end in defeat. It ends in freedom. Every time you choose the good, you strengthen the will. Every time you act from duty, you polish the soul. Every time you resist impulse, you affirm your moral identity. Strength of will is not about suppression. It is about liberation. It is the power to live according to the highest within you. And in this strength, the human being rises from nature to freedom, from impulse to principle, from desire to dignity. This is the quiet victory of the moral will, the triumph at the heart of Kant's vision of humanity. Part 29. The Meaning of Life in Kant's View. Chapter 1. Not Happiness. When people ask, what is the meaning of life? They often expect an answer that leads toward happiness, toward comfort, pleasure, satisfaction, or fulfillment. But Kant takes us in a different direction. For him, happiness cannot be the meaning of life because happiness is uncertain, fragile, and dependent on factors we cannot control. Illness can take it away. Circumstances can destroy it. Accidents, loss, age, loneliness, all can break the fragile conditions on which happiness rests. Kant believed that if the meaning of life depended on happiness, then life would be unstable and morality would be impossible. Because happiness is subjective, unpredictable, different for every person, tied to our natural desires. No rational foundation can stand on it. Kant never denied that happiness is good. He simply denied that it gives life its purpose. Instead, he believed that meaning must come from something stronger than emotion, more stable than circumstance, and deeper than pleasure. Meaning must come from within, from the rational self, from the moral will, from the part of us that cannot be destroyed by the changing world. Thus, for Kant, the meaning of life is not happiness. It is something far more dignified. Chapter 2. Not perfection. Kant also rejected the idea that the meaning of life is personal perfection. Perfection suggests flawlessness, mastery, achievement, completeness, success in every domain. But human beings are finite. We are fragile, limited creatures, always growing, never finished. To demand perfection is to demand the impossible. And when people chase perfection, they often fall into self-hatred, despair, unhealthy comparison, resentment, humiliation, burnout. Kant believed that perfection belongs to God or ideal reason, not to human beings. Instead of perfection, Kant emphasized progress. The meaning of life is not to become flawless, but to become better. Not to eliminate weakness, but to face it with honesty. Not to achieve a perfect character, but to cultivate a moral one. Perfection is a fantasy. Growth is real, and moral growth, the steady improvement of the will, is something within our reach. Thus, the meaning of life is not perfection, but something more human. Chapter 3. Moral growth. For Kant, the meaning of life is found in moral growth, in the steady, quiet effort to make the will stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the moral law. Moral growth does not happen in a single moment. It happens through constant choices, telling the truth, honoring others, resisting temptation, keeping promises, acting from duty, showing respect, doing the right thing even when it is difficult. Kant believed that the human being is always in development, always moving between the phenomenal self and the noumenal self. Every act of duty lifts the person closer to their rational nature. Every time you choose principle over impulse, you grow. Every time you treat others with dignity, you grow. Every time you act from respect for the moral law, you grow. The meaning of life is not achieving an endpoint. It is the journey of moral becoming. Growth gives life direction. Growth gives life purpose. Growth reveals the rational freedom that lives inside us. This growth is slow, often invisible, but deeply transformative, and it is the true measure of human worth. Chapter 4. Self-discipline. Kant believed that meaning also requires self-discipline, the ability to steer oneself according to principle rather than desire. Self-discipline is not repression. It is not self-punishment. It is not harshness. Self-discipline is the strength to act from reason when emotions pull in another direction. It means choosing honesty even when lying is easier, choosing kindness even when angry, choosing patience even when frustrated, choosing fairness even when disappointed, choosing duty even when tired, choosing dignity even when ignored. Self-discipline is the daily practice of aligning your actions with the moral law within. It is the quiet training of the will. Kant believed that the self must learn to govern itself, not to extinguish desire, but to guide it. Just as a rider guides a horse, reason must guide impulse, not by force, but by clarity, not by cruelty, but by commitment. Self-discipline is the bridge between moral insight and moral action. Without discipline, morality stays in thought. With discipline, morality becomes life. And through this practice, we grow closer to the freedom that defines us. Chapter 5. Becoming truly free. In the end, the meaning of life for Kant is freedom, but not the freedom of doing whatever we want. It is the deeper freedom of governing ourselves with reason. Freedom is not the absence of limits. Freedom is acting from moral law, from principles we choose rationally. Kant believed that true freedom is the highest achievement of the human being, because when we act from duty, we are not controlled by desire. We are not shaped by fear. We are not manipulated by emotion. We are not trapped by habit. We are not driven by instinct. We are not ruled by external forces. We act from the self, the noumenal self, the rational self, the free self. Becoming truly free means rising above the noise of appetite and impulse and choosing our actions from universal principles. Freedom is moral. Freedom is rational. Freedom is dignity in action. And freedom is the meaning of life. Not happiness, not perfection, but the slow, steady journey of becoming a being who acts from reason, from respect, from duty, from the moral law within. The meaning of life is to grow into the self that reason reveals, the self capable of freedom. And through this freedom, we discover our deepest identity and our highest purpose. Part 30, The Silent Night of Reason. Chapter 1, Calm Reflection. At the end of a long journey, there comes a moment when the mind no longer pushes forward and no longer looks back. It simply rests. Kant believed that reason has a quiet side, a side not concerned with argument, not driven by analysis, not hungry for certainty, a side that simply reflects. Calm reflection is not empty thought. It is the mind settling into clarity, the way a lake becomes still after the wind has passed. In this calmness, we see not the world, but ourselves, the choices we've made, the principles we follow, the intentions we carry. Reflection, for Kant, is not passive. It is active, gentle, and deeply moral. It is the moment when reason stops striving for power and instead becomes a mirror for our inner life. Here, in this quiet reflection, we understand the question that guided Kant from beginning to end. What kind of person am I becoming? This question is not loud. It whispers. It invites. It reminds. The silent night of reason begins with this calm unfolding, a stillness where everything falls into its place. Chapter 2, The Inner Law. When the noise of the world grows quiet, something deeper becomes audible, a voice that is not a voice, a law that is not written in ink, a presence that asks for nothing yet guides everything. This is the moral law within. It does not command from outside. It does not threaten or seduce. It does not offer reward. It simply shines, like a faint star above the horizon, small, steady, but impossible to ignore. Kant believed that the inner law is what makes every human being worthy of dignity. It shows us that we are more than impulse, more than habit, more than circumstance. We are capable of choosing from principle. And here, in the quiet of reason's night, we feel what Kant meant when he spoke of the two things that filled him with wonder: the starry sky above me and the moral law within me. The sky reminds us of vastness. The inner law reminds us of freedom. And together, they frame the human being as both small and infinite, a finite creature who carries within a spark of universal law. In this silent moment, we recognize the dignity we often forget. We sense the depth of our own moral being, and we understand that the moral law has always been there, guiding us quietly through every struggle. Chapter 3, A World You Help Create. Kant believed that human beings are not merely observers of the world. We are participants in shaping it. Through every action, we contribute to a moral universe larger than ourselves. Every time you act from duty, you make the world slightly more just. Every time you show respect, you strengthen the dignity of humanity itself. Every time you refuse to use someone as a tool for your own ends, you protect the sacred boundary of human worth. Every time you choose principle when impulse tempts you, you help build a world where freedom is real. This world is not built through grand achievements. It is built through small actions. Holding a promise, speaking honestly, acting fairly, offering kindness, practicing restraint, respecting others, choosing duty. These choices may feel small, but they are moral architecture, the quiet construction of a world worth living in. Kant reminds us that morality is not private, is not isolated, is not invisible. Every moral decision echoes outward into the shared world of rational beings. You help create the world through the principles you live by. In the silent night of reason, we see this clearly. We are each responsible for the moral shape of the future. Chapter 4. Hope Beyond Knowledge. Kant spent his life examining the limits of human knowledge. He showed that reason cannot know everything. Not the soul in its essence. Not God as an object. Not the afterlife. Not the thing in itself. Not the deepest structure of being. These belong to the realm beyond experience, beyond phenomena. But Kant never believed that ignorance leads to despair. Instead, he offered something quiet and profound. Hope. Hope is not belief without evidence. Hope is a moral orientation, a rational openness to the possibility of meaning beyond what we can prove. Kant believed that hope is necessary because reason itself points toward it. We cannot know that the soul is immortal, but our moral striving makes sense only if goodness matters beyond this life. We cannot know that God exists, but the moral law feels like an echo of something greater than ourselves. We cannot know that virtue will be rewarded, but we hope because the moral will is built for more than the visible world. Hope allows us to live with dignity in the midst of limits. Hope allows us to act morally even when outcomes are uncertain. Hope allows us to walk forward into mystery without fear. Kant's philosophy ends not in certainty, but in a quiet trust that morality is not in vain. Hope stands beyond knowledge the way the horizon stands beyond sight, unreachable, yet guiding. Chapter 5. Ending in Quiet Understanding. At the end of this long journey through Kant's world, through reason, morality, freedom, dignity, and the structure of human thought, we arrive at a kind of stillness. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of comprehension. A quiet understanding emerges. That life is not about perfect knowledge, but about honest inquiry. Not about achieving happiness, but about choosing goodness. Not about eliminating struggle, but about rising through it. Not about obeying external forces, but about listening to the inner law. Not about controlling the world, but about shaping the will. This is the silent night of reason, where thought becomes gentle, where duty becomes peaceful, where freedom becomes serene, and where the soul recognizes its own quiet depth. In this reflective calm, we understand Kant's final message. You are free, not because you can do anything you desire, but because you can choose what is right. You are dignified, not because of achievements, but because you carry the moral law within. You are part of humanity, not by birth alone, but by every action that honors the dignity of others. And you are not alone. You walk in a world shaped by countless moral wills, each trying, failing, trying again, to live according to the law written in reason. The night grows quiet. The mind grows still. The journey of Kant's philosophy comes to an end, not with a conclusion, but with understanding. A quiet understanding that the deepest meaning lies in the moral self, in a free, rational will that guides us through life with integrity, dignity, and the calm strength of reason. In the stillness after a long journey, there comes a moment when the mind lets go of questions, arguments, and complexities, and simply rests in understanding. You have walked through the landscape of Kant's thought, his reflections on knowledge, his exploration of freedom, his unwavering belief in human dignity, and his quiet confidence in the moral strength of reason. Now, in this final moment, you stand at the edge of everything you've learned, holding not a conclusion, but a deeper way of seeing the world. Kant never wanted disciples. He wanted thinkers. He wanted individuals capable of using their own reason, capable of asking the right questions, capable of choosing the moral path not because it is easy, but because it is right. He believed that every human being carries within them something extraordinary, a moral compass not given by society, nor shaped by emotion, but arising from the rational will itself. It is quiet. It is subtle. It is often drowned out by desire, distraction, fear, and noise. Yet it remains patient and unwavering, waiting for the moment when we choose to listen. As you now reflect on this journey, you may notice something subtle awakening within you. Not a set of answers, but a shift in how you approach life. Kant does not offer easy solutions. He does not promise that morality will be rewarded or that life will always make sense. He does not claim that reason can solve every mystery or illuminate every shadow. But he gives us something deeper, the ability to stand firmly on principles of our own choosing. He teaches that freedom is not a gift of circumstance, but a discipline of the mind. That dignity is not granted by society, but woven into the very structure of rational nature. That meaning does not come from pleasure or success, but from growth, integrity, and the quiet courage to follow the inner law even when no one sees. In this epilogue, you are invited to pause and breathe into that understanding. Think of the countless choices you will face in your life. Moments of doubt, moments of conflict, moments when the easy path will whisper your name. Kant does not ask for perfection. He asks for honesty. Honesty with yourself, honesty with your principles, honesty about the kind of person you are becoming. Every act of truthfulness, every moment of respect, every decision guided by duty rather than impulse. These are the quiet victories that give life its moral shape. The world will not always reward them, but your inner self will. Because the moral law within is not a judge waiting to punish, nor a ruler demanding obedience. It is your own rational nature calling you toward the person you most deeply wish to be. And when you listen to that voice, when you act from it, you experience a kind of peace that no external force can shake. A peace that comes not from certainty, but from integrity. Not from perfection, but from effort. Not from achievement, but from alignment with the highest part of yourself. As this journey closes, carry with you one final thought, the quiet truth that Kant believed defines the human condition. You are free. You are responsible. You are dignified. And you are capable of choosing the good. This freedom will not always feel easy, but it will always be yours. So as the night settles around you, as your mind grows soft and still, let Kant's final gift remain with you. A gentle confidence that within the calm silence of reason, you can always find the strength to choose rightly, to live honestly, and to walk through the world with dignity. Not because you must, but because you can. And in that ability, quiet, steady, and profoundly human, lies the deepest meaning of all.